Welcome, welcome! You're here at Peak Fanfiction. Today we present to you Naruto was the secret heir of all four Satans, and Rias Akeno Grayfia and Rossweisse all fell for him. Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1: The Letter Written in Blood. The ramen was going cold. Naruto noticed this the way he noticed most things, not immediately, not with any particular urgency, but with the quiet, sideways attention of someone who had learned early that the world didn't much care whether you were paying attention to it or not. He'd been staring at the bowl for 4 minutes, chopsticks resting across the rim, steam thinning into nothing, and the old woman behind the counter had already refilled his water twice without him asking because she was Chuchai's sister, and she understood that sometimes people came to eat and sometimes they came to sit somewhere warm. Tonight was a sitting somewhere warm night. "You're 17 now," he said to no one in particular. The woman behind the counter, whose name was Match and who had known him since he was small enough to sit on the counter itself, didn't bother looking up from the Sudoku she was doing badly. "Congratulations, eat your ramen." He picked up the chopsticks. He ate the ramen. It was cold, but it was still good because Chuchai's family made ramen that was good even cold, which Naruto had always thought was the truest measure of quality in anything, not how it performed at its peak, but how it held up when conditions turned against it. Outside, October had settled over the town the way October always did, not dramatically, not with the golden leaf pageantry that postcards promised, but with a kind of gray, patient heaviness like a blanket that smelled of rain. Konoha was a small city by any measure, the kind of place that appeared on regional maps in small font and disappeared from national conversation entirely. Naruto had grown up here. He'd grown up here specifically, in this pocket of ordinary, in this town where nothing of consequence had ever happened, and where the most dramatic event in living memory was the year the river flooded and the Yamanaka family's flower shop had to move to higher ground. He had always felt with a specificity that he couldn't explain and had long since stopped trying to, that he did not belong here. Not in a romantic way, not in the way of stories where the special child feels the pull of destiny like a north star through the ceiling. It was less poetic than that. It was more like wearing shoes that were the wrong size, not painful enough to stop you walking, but present, always present, a constant awareness of wrongness that you eventually learned to carry like furniture. He was 17 tonight and the wrongness had never been louder. He left 20 minutes later, flipping 2 bills onto the counter, tucking his hands into the pockets of his jacket orange, because it had always been orange and he'd stopped caring what people thought about that sometime around age 12, and stepped out into the October air. The street was quiet, a couple walking a dog, a convenience store with its windows too bright. A bicycle leaning against a post with no lock, which either meant the owner was nearby or the owner was very trusting. And Naruto had always privately hoped it was the latter because the world was better with trusting people in it. He was 3 blocks from home when the man fell out of the alley, not stumbled, not walked. Fell sideways, one hand catching the brick of the wall, the other pressed flat against his own chest in the particular way of a man trying to hold himself together. He was wearing a suit that had been expensive once and was now destroyed, and his skin was the wrong color, a gray-green pallor that had nothing to do with the streetlight. And when he looked up at Naruto, his eyes were the solid, unbroken crimson of something that had never been human. "Uzumaki," the man said. His voice had gravel in it and effort and something underneath both of those that Naruto couldn't name, something that sounded almost like relief. "Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto stopped walking. He didn't back up, he'd never been the backing up type. "Yeah," he said carefully, "that's me." The man's hand came away from his chest, and what was underneath it was not a wound in any conventional sense. It was a seal, dark and burning, the kind of thing that had edges that moved, that breathed, that looked like it had been pressed into his flesh from the inside. Naruto had seen strange things in his life. He'd seen things that didn't have explanations, had done things that didn't have explanations, had stood once on the roof of his apartment building during a thunderstorm and felt the lightning hit 20 feet away and felt not fear, not relief, but something like recognition. Like the storm was talking in a language he'd half forgot. He'd seen strange things, this was stranger. "There isn't much time," the man said, and he reached inside his ruined jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was sealed with wax the color of old blood. "Take it, don't open it here." Naruto crossed the distance between them without deciding to. He took the envelope. It was warm, not from being carried against the man's body, but inherently warm, like something alive was pressed between its pages. "Who are you?" Naruto asked. "A messenger." The man's crimson eyes were dimming at their edges the way embers dim when air stops reaching them. I have been carrying that letter for 17 years, since the night you were born, since the night they decided to hide you, who hid me. Your parents, a pause and then softer, all four of them. The ground didn't shake, the sky didn't crack. Naruto just stood there with the warm envelope in his hand and looked at this dying man and felt something slot into place in his chest. Not answers, not yet, but the shape of where answers would eventually go, the outline of a space that had always been empty and had always been the exact right size for something enormous. They're coming for you, the man said. They've known about you for 3 days. Someone broke the seal on the record. Someone who shouldn't have been able to. His hand fell away from the wall. He was going down and Naruto caught him because of course he did, because that was just what you did. Don't run, don't hide. You've been hiding your whole life without knowing it and he stopped, started again. Open the letter when you're alone, read it twice. The second time it will say more. That doesn't make sense, Naruto said. No, the man agreed and died. He dissolved not dramatically, not with light or sound or any particular ceremony, but simply dissolved the way salt dissolves in water, his body unwinding from the outside in, and in 4 seconds there was nothing in Naruto's arms but October air and the faint smell of something that was not quite smoke. Naruto stood in the empty street with the envelope in his hand, and his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Then he walked home because there was nothing else to do. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had good bones and terrible everything else. The landlord had spent 30 years meaning to renovate and had instead developed an elaborate philosophy about why renovation was ultimately a form of hubris. Naruto had lived here since he was 15, when the previous arrangement, a succession of temporary guardians who had treated him with varying degrees of discomfort, as though he were a package they'd been handed by mistake and were waiting for someone to collect, had finally concluded in a way that suited everyone. He had a kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom with a shower head that expressed opinions about water pressure, and a window that faced east so he got the morning light, which was the thing he'd specified and the only thing that had worked out exactly as intended. He sat at his kitchen table and put the envelope in front of him and looked at it for a long time. Then he opened it. The paper inside was not paper, or it had been paper once and had become something more than paper in the way that certain things accumulate meaning until they transcend their original category. It was covered in writing, dense, layered, in multiple hands, in multiple languages, some of which Naruto recognized and some of which he did not. And then he looked at it and his eyes adjusted and it resolved into something readable, into something that entered his head not through comprehension but through a more direct route, like music bypassing the thinking mind entirely. To our son. To the impossible thing we made between 4 impossible people, who had no right to love each other and no ability to stop. If you are reading this, then the protections have ended and the world knows what you are. We are sorry it took this form, we are sorry for 17 years of silence, we are not sorry for you. We were never sorry for you, your name is Naruto Uzumaki. We chose it together, your 4 parents, in the hour after your birth, in a room that no longer exists in a place that is no longer safe. Uzumaki is your mother Leviathan's family name before her ascension. Naruto is what your father Lucifer insisted upon because he said it sounded like someone who couldn't be stopped, and he was right about very few things, but he was right about you. What you are the heir of all 4 original Satans, Lucifer, Leviathan, Asmodeus, Beelzebub. We do not mean this in the political sense, those titles have been inherited by others who wear them with varying degrees of grace. We mean this in the literal sense. You carry all 4 bloodlines in a configuration that should be genetically impossible, which is accurate because it was not achieved genetically. It was achieved by 4 people who loved each other with a recklessness that the devil world will never forgive and who chose in the end to protect what they'd made over everything else. You have power. You have always had power. You have felt it your whole life like a second heartbeat, a deeper frequency, a thing beneath your skin that has no category. It is all 4 of ours combined, refined, compacted into you. It has been sealed, not suppressed, not diminished, but folded the way you fold light through a lens. When the seal breaks, and it will break now tonight because this letter is the key, you will feel it unfold. We cannot tell you what to do with it. We chose to die rather than become weapons. We hope you choose differently. We hope you choose to live. Do not be afraid of what you are. Be afraid of nothing. Your parents who loved you first and always Naruto read it twice. Second time it said more. The second time there were coordinates and names and dates and a family tree that sprawled across the page like a root system. and there were descriptions of powers and their mechanisms, not as instruction manuals but as recognitions. You will know this already, here's what it's called, and there was a single line at the very bottom that hadn't been there the first time, written in a hand different from all the others, shakier, more urgent. The council has sent 4 assassins. They are already in your city. The seal breaking will announce you to everything in range. Be ready. Naruto set the letter down. He felt it then, the unfolding. It started in his sternum. A warmth that was not warmth, that was something on the other side of the warmth spectrum, past heat into something that had no temperature at all. It moved outward from that point with a slowness that was almost thoughtful, tracing pathways through him that he'd always known were there and had never had a name for. He breathed in, and when he breathed out, something breathed out with him that had been held in for 17 years, and the kitchen table cracked cleanly down the middle, and the window glass crystallized into frost from the inside out, and the light bulb didn't blow, instead it burned 3 times brighter than its rating, a cool, steady white that had nothing to do with electricity. He sat in that light for 30 seconds, completely still, taking stock of what he now was. It was not overwhelming, that was the thing. It wasn't a flood, wasn't a loss of control. It was, if anything, the opposite. It was like having spent your life writing with your non-dominant hand and switching to the other. It was like the world had just come into focus from a blur he'd mistaken for normal vision. Every sense extended, deepened, restructured. He could feel the building around him, every room, every person in it. The old woman on the second floor watching late-night television, the couple on the first floor arguing about something trivial in the comfortable way of people who argue about trivial things because the real things are fine. He could feel the street outside, the whole city beyond that, the pulse and mass of it. And at 4 distinct points in that city, north, south, east, and a 4th that was technically northwest but close enough, he could feel things that were not human doing their best to move like they were. He stood up from the cracked table. "All right," he said quietly, not to anyone, to the night maybe, or to whatever it was his parents had left in his blood. "4 of you," he almost smiled. "Good, I was bored." The first one came through the window, which was dramatic, and Naruto respected the commitment to drama even as he stepped sideways without looking and let 4 feet of conjured devil blade pass through the space where his head had been. The assassin, young, male, wearing the kind of controlled expression that spoke of serious training and genuine conviction, landed in a crouch and was up with a second strike before most people would have processed the first. Fast, genuinely fast. Naruto caught the wrist on the second strike and felt the bones there and didn't break them because he wasn't angry, and because breaking bones was not the opening move of someone who wanted a conversation. "Wait," Naruto said. The assassin did not wait. He dissolved into shadow and reconstituted 6 feet behind Naruto, good technique, well executed, and drove an elbow toward the base of Naruto's skull. Naruto turned, caught the elbow with an open palm and redirected it into the wall with enough force to put a fist-shaped impression in the plaster but not enough to put the arm through the drywall. I said, "Wait." "You are an abomination," the assassin said, flat and practiced, the words of someone who has made their peace with what they're doing. "The bloodlines cannot converge. The balance—" "I know the argument," Naruto said. He did, somehow he did. The letter had done something to the knowledge already buried in him, and he understood now the shape of the politics, the history, the fear that lived underneath the ideology. "You think one person holding all 4 bloodlines breaks the structural logic of the 3-world order. You think I'm a bomb waiting to go off?" The assassin's eyes flickered. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't engagement. "You're not wrong," Naruto continued. "About the risk, about what I am. You're wrong about what I'm going to do with it, but I understand why you can't know that. You're working from information that doesn't include me yet. I have my orders. I know." Naruto let go of the arm, stepped back. "So do something useful with them." What he released into the room was not precisely power in the combative sense. It was more like presence, the full weight of what he was, unfiltered, allowed to exist in the space without being aimed at anything. The temperature dropped. The walls vibrated at a frequency just below audible. The shadows in the corners of the room moved toward him rather than away, and the light from the overbright bulb bent slightly, as though the room itself was orienting toward him the way flowers orient toward the sun. The assassin went pale, not with fear exactly, with recognition. Because he was a devil and he could feel what Naruto was, and what he felt was not the signature of one bloodline or 2. It was all 4, layered and woven and combined into something coherent, something unified, something that had no precedent in any devil's experience because it had never existed before. "Go back," Naruto said quietly. "Tell them what you felt. Tell them I'm not hiding. the assassin left. Not through the window this time, through the front door, walking like someone who has been given a great deal to think about. The other three were less interested in conversation. The second came from the street, a woman in her 30s with the cold, precise energy of someone who had built their entire identity around being the most dangerous thing in any room. She opened with a full destruction blast, Naruto's building's front wall vanishing in a cascade of red-black energy that took most of the landlord's non-renovation philosophy with it. Naruto was already outside, standing in the street, the debris drifting around him in a slow orbit as though it couldn't quite figure out where to land. "You missed," he said helpfully. She did not miss again, or rather she did not stop trying not to miss 6 consecutive destruction strikes, fast and precisely aimed, the last 3 arriving simultaneously from different angles. Naruto let 2 of them hit. The watching part of this, the part that would have mattered to anyone paying close attention, was not that the strikes didn't hurt him. They did technically produce sensation, a pressure and heat that was genuinely notable. What mattered was that he absorbed them, not deflected, not tanked. The destruction energy hit him and went nowhere. It entered him like water entering the sea, and the sea did not change. The woman stopped. Naruto looked at his own hands, quietly interested. "That's new," he said, meaning it was new in the sense of it being the first time he'd consciously done it, though the mechanism had been there all along, waiting. He looked up at her. "You're scared," he said without accusation, "not of dying, of being wrong. About what you were told this would be." Her hands were still raised. They were not shaking because she was too disciplined for that, but the stillness was effortful in a way it hadn't been before. "I'm not your enemy," Naruto said. "The people who sent you might be, but you're not mine." She fled. Not with dignity, not with the composed retreat of a professional. She fled with the raw, animal urgency of someone whose categories have just been violated, who needs space to rethink everything they know. Naruto let her go. The third and fourth came together, which suggested coordination, which suggested they were the better trained members of the group, which turned out to be true and also not to matter. They came from above and below simultaneously, one dropping from what must have been a 40-foot altitude in devil form, wings folded into a dive, the other erupting from the earth in a column of dark energy that split the asphalt of the street like wet paper. The aerial attack was meant to drive him downward into the ground attack. It was well designed. It would have worked on most things. Naruto didn't go down, he went up. He didn't have wings, not yet, possibly not ever. He hadn't decided what form his power would take in practice. But he had the thing underneath wings, the thing that makes flight possible, the fundamental force that devils access through physical transformation, and Naruto accessed the way he accessed everything directly without the intermediary of form. He rose 12 feet straight up, the aerial attacker suddenly finding their target above them instead of below, the geometries of the assault collapsing into uselessness. In the half-second of recalibration, Naruto hit the aerial attacker with a pulse of combined Lucifer pressure, not destruction, something older and heavier, a gravitational authority, the force of a name that meant something in the vocabulary of power, and the attacker dropped, not dead, not even seriously hurt, but grounded, pressed flat against the street under a weight that wasn't physical, that was more like the weight of being told. The earth attack devil surfaced from the asphalt and found Naruto already there, already looking at them, and froze. Because what they saw, what any devil present would have seen, what any sensitive creature within range was feeling in their spine and their older instincts, was a 17-year-old boy in an orange jacket, standing in the wreckage of his own apartment building, in the middle of a torn-up October street, with 4 concurrent strains of pure devil power cycling through him in a slow, visible rotation that shouldn't have been possible, that made the air around him feel like standing too close to a star. And he wasn't angry, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't performing dominance or reaching for it. He was just there, completely present, completely himself, and the power was completely his, and the combination of those two things was more frightening than anything either of them had trained to face. "Done?" Naruto asked. The grounded attacker peeled themselves off the asphalt. The earth attacker retreated back into the ground, which Naruto thought was stylistically consistent at least. He landed, straightened his jacket, looked at the crater where his building's front wall used to be. He said. The landlord was going to have opinions about this. They were going to be loud opinions, delivered with the passion of a man who had finally been given a concrete reason to renovate, and they were going to be at 7 in the morning, and Naruto was going to stand there and accept them because that was the right thing to do. That was a tomorrow problem. Tonight's problems were not yet finished. He felt it before he heard it, a vibration in the new, expanded sense that the unfolding had given him, a distant signature that was familiar in the way the letter had made things familiar, a recognition dressed up as a stranger. Something massive and attentive had turned toward this part of the world, multiple somethings. The fight had been noticed, and not just by the council. The pulse of 4 unified bloodlines waking up and flexing was, apparently, the kind of thing that traveled. He sat down on the edge of the broken pavement. The street was empty now. The couple who'd been walking their dog had long since made the sensible decision to be somewhere else. The convenience store's lights had flickered off. It was just him and the October air and the cooling wreckage of what had been a fairly unremarkable evening until about an hour ago. He picked up the envelope from where it had fallen. He'd carried it outside without thinking, a habit from childhood of keeping close anything that mattered, and held it. The warmth in it was different now, less urgent, more settled, like embers after a fire has done its work. "Do not be afraid of what you are," it had said. He wasn't. That was the honest truth of it, and he sat with the honesty for a moment because it deserved more than a glance, this fact about himself. He wasn't afraid of what he was. He wasn't thrilled about the wreckage or the assassins or the 17 years of context he was only now receiving, or the certain knowledge that this was very much not the end of tonight's complications. He wasn't thrilled about any of that, but the power itself, the thing that had been folded inside him for 17 years and was now open. That felt like coming home. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope and put the envelope in his jacket pocket, and he sat in the October street, and he let his extended senses range outward across the city, and he began, for the first time with full equipment, to understand what world he actually lived in. There were devils in Kyoto, several nests of them organized around what felt like territorial anchors, specific buildings, specific families, specific humans who had devil marks on them without knowing it. There were fallen angels in the northern quarter, 3 of them, trying very hard to be inconspicuous and managing it about as well as anyone tries very hard to be anything. There were sacred gear users scattered through the civilian population like lights on a dark map. And somewhere in the city, behind the most careful warding he'd yet encountered, careful enough that it had almost hidden itself, which was its own kind of tell, the way the best camouflage is the kind that looks natural rather than the kind that looks like it's trying, there was something that felt like a headquarters, something organized. Something that had been here long enough to settle into the city's structure like a foundation stone. Something that, when he focused on it, focused back. He stood up. "Okay," he said quietly to the night, to his parents' letter, to the 4 dead Satans whose blood was doing something complicated and new in his veins. "Where do we start?" The night for once had an answer. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. An unknown number had sent him a message. No introduction, no explanation, just an address in the Kyoto district he didn't recognize, and below it, a single line. "We know what you are. We've been waiting for you. Don't make us wait until morning." Naruto read it once, looked at the return address, looked at the direction it corresponded to in the city's layout, and felt it align exactly with the warded headquarters he'd already located through other means. He pocketed the phone, rolled his shoulders once, the way a person rolls their shoulders when they're about to step into something they're not sure about but not afraid of either. Looked at the broken building one more time, with a brief private apology to the landlord's decades of careful theoretical renovation. Then he started walking. The city was dark and quiet around him. His footsteps were steady. Somewhere behind him, the 4 impressions left by 4 assassins were already fading from the earth, and somewhere ahead of him, the most warded address in Kyoto was waiting, and the people inside it didn't know yet what they'd invited through their door. They would. By morning, everyone would. Chapter 2, The Crimson House. The address led him to a school. Naruto stood at the gate of Kyoto Academy at 11:30 on a Tuesday night and looked at it the way you look at something that is trying to appear like one thing while being obviously another. The architecture was old, the kind of old that had been maintained so carefully it had passed back through expensive and come out the other side as intimidating. Iron gates. Stone walls with real weight in them. Trees that had been growing long enough to have opinions about the buildings they surrounded. It looked like the kind of school that produced people who went on to run things, and it probably did, though Naruto suspected the things they went on to run were not the things the curriculum officially prepared them for. The wards were extraordinary. Even standing outside the gate, he could feel them layered through the property like geological strata, old work at the foundation, newer work on top, different hands, different sensibilities, but all of it pointing toward the same purpose, which was nothing unusual here, nothing to see, nothing to feel. Please move along. It was the most sophisticated concealment architecture he'd ever encountered, which was a low bar given that he'd only known about concealment architecture for approximately 90 minutes, but his instincts rated it highly regardless. He walked through the gate. The wards noticed him immediately. He felt them press against his presence the way you feel pressure in your ears at altitude, a subtle, polite insistence, an attempt to redirect rather than repel. He kept walking and the wards adjusted their angle and tried again, and he kept walking, and after a few seconds the wards apparently made a decision and stopped trying, which he appreciated. No point in fighting something that was going to go through you regardless. The school grounds at night had a specific quality, that particular hush of an institutional space emptied of its people, where the buildings retain the shape of activity without the substance of it. Pathways between structures, a courtyard with a fountain that was still running, the main building dark except for 2 lit windows on the 3rd floor, far right wing. He was heading for those windows before he'd consciously decided to, because they were obviously where he needed to be. He was halfway across the courtyard when the figure dropped from the roof of the main building and landed 20 feet in front of him in a crouch that was, he had to be honest, pretty good. Not as dramatic as the window entrance the first assassin had managed, but more controlled, more considered. The figure straightened, young woman. Red hair like something between copper and flame, worn loose, falling past her shoulders with the kind of careless perfection that takes either great effort or very good genetics. She was wearing casual clothes, dark jeans, a white shirt, but the way she was standing was not casual in the slightest. She had the posture of someone who had been trained to project authority and had internalized it so thoroughly it had become genuine. Blue-green eyes that were doing several things simultaneously, assessing, calculating, preparing to do whatever the assessment concluded was necessary, and underneath all of that, visible only because Naruto was now operating with expanded perception, curious, genuinely, helplessly curious. "You walked through the outer ward," she said, not an accusation, a fact being filed in a mental cabinet. "I did," Naruto agreed, "and the secondary defensive layer, and the tertiary, which has a pressure threshold calibrated to devils of ultimate class and above." She paused. "You're 17. "As of about 3 hours ago, yeah." She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm Rias Gremory." "I know the name," he said, because the letter had been thorough and he'd processed it in the way that the unfolding had apparently optimized him for, quickly and with retention. Rias Gremory, heiress to the Gremory clan, holder of the power of destruction, current student at this school in the human world as part of what the devil aristocracy called a developmental placement, which was a diplomatic way of saying we sent our best young people to live among humans to learn things our world forgot. He knew the name. What he hadn't known, because letters didn't capture it, was the way she looked at things. Like she was arguing with them in her head, like she was already 3 steps into a conversation that hadn't started yet. "You know who I am," she said. "You know who I am," he replied. "We've known about you for 3 days," he said. "Since someone broke the seal on the record, I know who broke it." She blinked. It was a small blink, barely perceptible, but it was a genuine reaction. She hadn't expected him to be ahead of her. "We're trying to determine that. So someone broke it. The information reached whoever is running the Purification Council. Don't look like that. I know about them too, and they sent 4 people to my apartment tonight." He tilted his head. "Is that why you texted me? You knew they were moving." "We've been monitoring the council's activity in this city for months," Rias said carefully. She was recalibrating on the fly and doing it well, adjusting the conversation she'd prepared for to accommodate a version of him she hadn't anticipated. "When the seal broke, we had approximately 12 hours before they could mobilize. I thought we might have until morning." "You thought I'd be harder to find. I thought you'd be more." She stopped. "More what? I don't know." "More confused." She said it honestly, which he appreciated. "You found this place on your own." "I felt it when my power opened up." He glanced at the lit windows on the 3rd floor. "Who else is up there?" Rias followed his gaze and then looked back at him with an expression that was doing its best to be neutral and landing somewhere closer to impressed, which she was clearly not delighted about. "My peerage." "And you came down here alone?" "Yes, because you didn't want your peerage involved in the initial contact in case it went badly," he said. "Which means you were prepared for this to go badly, which means you have a plan for if I'm not cooperative." "Do you intend to be cooperative?" "I intend to have a conversation," Naruto said. "Whether it's cooperative depends on what you want." She studied him. He let her, standing easy in the courtyard with his hands in his jacket pockets, the power inside him cycling quietly, not displayed, not hidden, just present, the way breathing is present, not performed but undeniable. He could feel her reading it. She was Gremory, she had enough sensitivity to feel the fourfold signature even at rest, and he watched the knowledge move through her face in real time, the confirmation of something she'd been told and had believed only partially until now. "Come upstairs," she said. "Sure," he said. The Occult Research Club room on the third floor was the kind of space that had been shaped by the people who used it until it stopped looking like a schoolroom at all. High-backed chairs arranged in a loose circle. A couch against one wall occupied by a boy with silver hair and an expression of ostentatious boredom that was doing exactly zero work to conceal his genuine tension. Bookshelves that held things with titles that were not part of any academic curriculum. Candles that were technically fire code violations and practically the least concerning thing in the room. A large desk at the far end, with a chess set mid-game that had been arranged by someone who thought carefully about position. The board boy was Kiba Yuyudo, Rias Knight, and he tracked Naruto's entrance with the focused non-expression of a fighter doing threat assessment. Beside him, cross-legged on the arm of a chair in a posture that suggested she'd been doing something else and had turned to look at him mid-thought, was Kaneko. Small, white-haired, her expression currently reading as blank in the specific way that meant processing. And by the window, standing with her arms loosely folded and a half-smile on her face that was a piece of art in its own right, something warm on the surface and something considerably more complex underneath, like a painting that changes depending on how the light hits it, was Akeno Himejima. Naruto looked at her, she looked at him. The half-smile didn't change exactly, it just added a layer. "So," Akeno said, her voice carrying that characteristic lilt that managed to sound both entirely pleasant and faintly dangerous at the same time, "You're the boy who broke all 4 wards and didn't even look like he was trying." "I was trying a little," Naruto said, out of respect. Her smile completed itself. "Ara, how thoughtful." Rias settled into the chair behind the large desk, not aggressively, but definitively with the ease of someone sitting in a space that has always been theirs. She laced her fingers together and looked at Naruto, who had not sat down. "Will you sit?" she asked. In a second, he was doing a slow read of the room, not with his eyes but with the extended sense, checking for anything that wasn't what it appeared to be. He found nothing. These people were exactly what they seemed, which was in itself a kind of remarkable. People who were exactly what they seemed were rarer than people thought. "Your wards are good." "Who laid the foundation work?" "My father had a specialist. The base layer is at least 200 years old, not your father." Rias paused. "My grandmother's contract with a ward specialist. How did you? Can you date construction?" "I can feel the difference between old work and new work. It's like hearing 2 people playing the same piece of music, same notes, but the age of the instrument comes through." He pulled out the chair opposite her desk and sat down. "My father was Lucifer. Apparently he had a thing for acoustic metaphors. That might be where I get it." The room was quiet for a moment. "You know," Kiba said from the couch, not aggressive, genuinely careful, "that's not a small claim." "I know," Naruto said. "I didn't make it until 3 hours ago because I didn't know until 3 hours ago. I'm not asking you to believe it because I said so." He set the envelope on the desk between himself and Rias. "I'm telling you because the people trying to kill me believe it, and that means it's functionally true regardless of whether the genealogy checks out." Rias reached out and touched the envelope seal with 2 fingers, and he felt her power make contact with it and then pull back sharply. She looked up at him. "This seal is all 4 bloodlines," he nodded. "Yeah, this is authentic," she said quietly. "I can feel Lucifer's signature in the wax, that specific, that old." She withdrew her hand. "Do you understand what this means?" "Tell me your version," he said. "I have mine, but I want to hear yours." She looked at him for a long second, reading him, deciding something, and then she talked. She talked for a long time, in the precise, well-organized way of someone who had been thinking about a subject for a while and had their thoughts in order. She told him about the balance of power in the 3-world order, the way the original 4 Satan bloodlines had been distributed after the Great War, how those bloodlines now lived in separate political families, and the balance between them was the structural backbone of Devil civilization. She told him about the Purification Council, which was older than its current leadership, which had been created specifically to ensure the 4 bloodlines never converged again after a prophecy in the earliest days of rebuilt Devil society had warned of exactly this. She told him about the prophecy itself, how it had been interpreted as a warning of catastrophe, how that interpretation had calcified into doctrine, how doctrine had become policy and policy had become assassination orders. She told him all of this efficiently and without dramatics, and at the end of it she looked at him across the desk and said, "The prophecy doesn't actually say it's a catastrophe." Naruto looked at her. "Go on, it says the convergence of all 4 bloodlines will end the current order." Rias held his gaze. "The council decided that meant destruction. My family has always believed it meant change." She paused. "I've been researching it since I was 14, since I first found a reference to the possibility of convergence in my father's library and understood what it would mean." Another pause, smaller. "I never thought I'd meet the convergence in person. I'm a person," Naruto said, "not a convergence." "I know that," she said, and something in her voice changed when she said it, became less formal, more direct, like she'd stepped briefly out from behind a professional facade to say something she actually meant. "That's why I texted you instead of letting the council handle it." He considered her. The red hair, the careful eyes, the intelligence that ran through everything she said like a current. The way she'd come downstairs alone to meet him in the dark, which was either very brave or very foolish, and he was fairly certain it was the former. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "What do you want?" she replied. "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed. "But you came here when you didn't have to. You could have left the city tonight. You have every reason to, and I suspect you have the power to make it stick if anyone came after you. You came here instead." She leaned forward slightly. "So I'd rather understand what you want before I tell you what I want. Because whatever arrangement we come to should be one you actually choose." He was quiet for a moment. The candles in the room did something complex with the shadows. Akeno had moved. At some point during Ria's summary, she had settled onto the arm of a chair closer to his side of the room, not intrusively, just close enough that if he turned his head she was in his peripheral vision. Kaneko had not moved but was watching him with the intensity of something small and very precise. "I want to understand what I am," Naruto said finally, "not the political version, not the genealogy. I want to know what my parents were actually like. I want to know why they chose each other and what it cost them." He paused. "And then I want to deal with the people who are trying to kill me, and I want to do it in a way that doesn't level the city." "That last part narrows the options significantly," Kiba said from the couch, and it wasn't entirely unfriendly. "I know," Naruto said. "I'm open to suggestions." Rias looked at him with an expression that he was starting to understand was her genuine face, not the carefully composed heiress face which was also good, but this one which was the version of her that existed underneath the role. It was a face that asked questions, that turned things over, that was genuinely, perpetually, a little bit unsatisfied with whatever the current level of understanding was. "There's a library," she said, "in the basement of this building. It has documents going back to the 1st century of the rebuilt Devil World. I found references to your parents there, not just their political records but personal records, letters. One account from someone who knew your father Lucifer personally before everything." She paused. "I found it 8 months ago and I've been trying to figure out what it means ever since. Now you're sitting across from me and maybe it means you." "Show me," he said. She stood this way. The library was not a room. It was a set of rooms, connected, extending further back into the building's foundation than the building's footprint technically allowed, which told Naruto something about who had designed this space and with what priorities. The light was warm and sourceless, no visible fixtures, the kind of lighting arrangement that was either very sophisticated mundane engineering or something with a devil seal at its root. The shelves were dense and ordered with a logic that wasn't immediately alphabetical or categorical, more intuitive, more organic, like whoever had organized it had known their subject well enough to arrange it by relationship rather than by label. Rias moved through it with the ease of familiarity. Third aisle, second shelf from the top, a folder that looked deliberately unremarkable. She pulled it and set it on the reading table in the center of the space, and Naruto sat down across from it, and she opened it. The personal account was written in a hand that had been old when it wrote these words and was now ancient, the handwriting precise with the precision of age, every letter formed deliberately. It described in the first person a meeting with Lucifer in his last years, not the political figure, not the Satan of formal record, but the man, who had apparently been funny, unexpectedly funny, with a dry humor that surfaced at inappropriate moments and a habit of naming things he liked after what they felt like rather than what they were called. who had loved music, who had argued with Leviathan about everything and agreed with her about everything that mattered. Who had, in his last coherent year, spoken often about the child he and the others had hidden, the impossible thing they'd made together, with a specific combination of terror and pride that the account writer rendered without sentimentality but with unmistakable clarity. He said the boy would break things that needed breaking and fix things that everyone had decided couldn't be fixed. I asked how he could know this. He said, because we made him from the parts of us that refused to accept that anything was permanent. Naruto read this. Read it again. He sounds like you, Akeno said from behind him. He hadn't heard her come into the library, which meant either she moved very quietly or he'd been more absorbed in the reading than he'd realized. She was leaning against the nearest shelf, her arms folded loosely, reading the page from his angle. The description, you think so? The humor, she said, the inconvenient optimism, that's not optimism, that's stubbornness. Ara, what's the difference? He considered this seriously. Optimism assumes things will work out, stubbornness doesn't care either way, it just keeps going. She was quiet for a moment, looking at him with that layered expression, the warmth and the complexity underneath it. Which one are you? Both, probably. I didn't know I could be both until about 2 hours ago. He turned back to the page. Was Leviathan's personality documented anywhere in here? There's a separate file, Rias said, appearing at his other shoulder. She reached past him and drew a thinner folder from a different section of the reading table. She'd pulled multiple documents, he realized, had been preparing this before he'd arrived. She'd been expecting him, not today, not necessarily, but she'd been expecting the moment and she'd been getting ready for it. He found this unexpectedly touching. The Leviathan file was less personal, official records mostly, formal accounts, but between the lines of political documentation you could read a woman who had operated with constant, barely contained velocity, who had driven policy by moving faster than opposition could form, and then dealing with the opposition when it caught up, which was apparently a style that had worked for centuries and made everyone around her feel perpetually behind. The account of her relationship with the other three was brief and dry and included the line, their union was against every political, theological, and logistical convention, which appeared to be a significant part of its appeal. Naruto laughed, a short, genuine sound that bounced off the library walls. Rias startled slightly. Then, despite herself, she smiled. She was like you too, she said. Fast, he guessed, like you couldn't stop her by standing in her way. You'd have to get ahead of her and no one could, she paused. You walked through the wards tonight without stopping. Is that what we're calling fast? I'm calling it characteristic. She closed the folder. She was standing close, not intrusively, but close enough that he was aware of it in the particular way you're aware of warmth from a nearby source. The council won't stop, you know that. I know, they'll escalate what you did tonight, handling 4 of their operatives, that won't frighten them off. It will confirm their fear, it will make them more certain that the prophecy requires your elimination. She held his gaze. They have resources that go beyond assassination squads. I know, he said again. Lord Phoenix the Elder, she blinked. You know about Phoenix? The letter was thorough. He closed the file on his side of the table. He's the one who's afraid, not strategically afraid, genuinely afraid. He believes the prophecy means what the council's doctrine says it means. He's not wrong to be afraid of that interpretation, he's just wrong about which response to it is correct. He stood. You can't reason with that kind of fear directly, you have to change what it's afraid of. Rias looked at him for a long moment. And how do you propose to do that? I don't know yet, he said honestly, but it starts with not hiding. The reason the fear calcified is because I was hidden for 17 years. The prophecy was an abstraction. And if then, now I'm standing in a school library in Kyoto at midnight and I have a face and a name and a jacket that is admittedly a slightly questionable color, and I am demonstrably not the weapon the council built their doctrine around. He picked up the envelope from where he'd set it on the table. Abstractions are scarier than people. I need to become a person to everyone who's afraid of what I am. That's going to require you to engage with Devil Society, Rias said carefully. Publicly, yeah, which requires a social and political framework, credentials, allegiances. I know what you're about to suggest, he said. Do you object to it? He thought about it. The idea of belonging to someone's household, being categorized in the social architecture of the devil world, having a status defined by someone else's name, his first instinct was a mild, reflexive resistance, the kind that came from being classified as other people's problem his whole life. But this was different. This wasn't someone assigning him a category for their convenience. This was if he was reading Rias correctly, and he thought he was someone offering him a handhold while he figured out what his own category actually was. "I'll stay in Kyoto," he said. "I'll work with you, but I'm not joining a peerage." Rias absorbed this. "You'd be more protected?" "I don't need to be protected," he said, not unkindly. "And if I join your peerage, you become a target in a way you aren't right now. The council's problem is with me. I want to keep it that way." He paused, ally not subordinate. She looked at him for a long moment with that argument-in-progress expression, and then she nodded once, a single, decisive motion. "Ally," she agreed. "Good." He moved toward the library door. "I need somewhere to sleep. The council's people did a number on my building's structural integrity." "We have guest quarters," Rias said. "In the building, several rooms. You run a devil household out of a school." "It's a very good school, I can tell." He paused at the door, looked back at her. "Thank you for the documents." "For having them ready." She looked briefly, genuinely caught off guard, as though she'd prepared for many versions of this conversation, and this specific turn of its simple, direct gratitude hadn't been among them. "I've been waiting for you for 2 years," she said, "or waiting for whoever you'd be." "I thought I should be ready." "You were," he said. "Good night, Rias." He said her name naturally, without the formality that her title usually attracted, and she looked at him in a way that was hard to categorize and that she herself seemed uncertain about. He was already in the corridor before she found her response. "Good night, Naruto." Akeno found him in the corridor before he'd gone 20 steps. She fell into pace beside him with the easy, unhurried quality that characterized everything she did, and for a moment she didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything, and they walked the quiet corridor of a school that was also something much stranger, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. "You handled that well," she said. "Rias doesn't give ground in negotiations." She wasn't negotiating, he said. She was figuring out who I was, and now that she has, ask her. He glanced sideways at her. "What about you? Are you figuring out who I am too, or have you already decided?" Akeno smiled, the real version, not the art piece version, smaller and less performed and consequently more interesting. "I've decided several things," she said. "I reserve the right to revise them." "Fair, you felt the wards when you came through," she said. "It wasn't quite a question. Not just Rias, you felt mine as well. The secondary layer has my work threaded through it." "Fell angel lightning," he said. "You weave it differently than straight devil work. It has a different texture. Almost musical." He paused. "It's good work." She was quiet for 3 steps. "You're the first person who's described it that way." "What do people usually say? That it's effective?" Another pause. "Or they don't mention it at all because the fallen angel part makes them uncomfortable." "The fallen angel part is the interesting part," he said. She stopped walking. He took one more step before he realized and turned back. She was standing in the corridor looking at him with an expression that had several layers and that he didn't entirely have the context to read yet, but that had, underneath everything, a quality he recognized from the letter, the quality of someone who had not expected to be seen clearly and had been, and didn't quite know what to do with that. "Guest rooms are on the 2nd floor," she said. "Last door on the left has the best east-facing window." He held her gaze for a moment. "How did you know I'd want the east-facing one?" "You walked across the courtyard toward the lit windows without hesitating," she said. "East wing, 3rd floor." "You oriented east automatically." She tilted her head slightly. "Morning light person," he looked at her. "You were watching from the beginning." "I was curious from the beginning," she said, with the pleasant precision of someone making a distinction that matters. "That's different." "A little," he agreed. She smiled again, the small, real version, and turned and walked back toward the library, and he watched her go for a second before turning toward the stairs. The room at the end of the 2nd floor corridor was clean and spare, with a window that faced exactly where she'd said it would face, and a narrow bed with blankets that had obviously been placed there recently, the folds still sharp. Someone had known he was coming, or had hoped, or both. He sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in his hands and the letter folded inside it, and he thought about his parents, 4 people who had made him out of the parts of themselves that refused to accept anything was permanent, which meant he was, at his structural root, an argument against finality. An argument that things could change and survive the changing. Outside, the city was quiet, the October dark pressed gently against the east-facing glass. He thought about Rias, who had been preparing for 2 years for something she couldn't be sure would ever arrive. He thought about Akeno, who described her work as effective in the flat tone of someone who had given up expecting more than that. He thought about the assassins in the street, the dying messenger, the warm envelope that had been carried for 17 years by someone who had never stopped believing he'd one day be alive to receive it. He thought about Lord Fenix the Elder, somewhere in the politics of the devil world, genuinely afraid, genuinely convinced that Naruto's existence was the prelude to catastrophe, moving pieces on a board that Naruto was now unavoidably standing on. Don't be afraid of what you are, be afraid of nothing. He lay back on the bed without undressing, one arm folded behind his head, and looked at the ceiling. He wasn't afraid. He wanted to be clear about that, at least to himself, in the quiet of this borrowed room in a school that was more than a school. He wasn't afraid of the council, or Fenix, or the politics, or the three-world order, or the weight of a fourfold inheritance that had apparently broken every previous person who'd carried a fraction of it. He was, if he was being completely honest, a little excited. He closed his eyes. Through the walls, the words that Akeno had woven hummed at their specific frequency, and he could hear the musical quality in them that no one else had named, and he listened to it the way you listen to something that was made by a person you want to understand better, with attention and without hurry. He fell asleep to the sound of it. Outside, the October city went about its quiet business, and in its warded heart in a school that was hiding something extraordinary, something shifted, the way things shift when the piece that has been missing for a very long time has finally arrived and the shape of everything rearranges itself, almost imperceptibly, to account for its presence. The east window waited for the morning. Chapter 3, The Queen Without a Master. The summons came at dawn. Not to Naruto, to Rias. A small, flat disk of compressed devil energy that materialized on her desk while she was still in her chair, having not slept, surrounded by documents she'd pulled from the library after Naruto had gone upstairs. It hummed once against the wood and went still, and the seal on its face was the silver and black of the Lucifuge house, which meant it had come from Surzech's household, which meant it was not optional. She picked it up and pressed her thumb to the center and heard her brother's voice, quiet and careful in the way Surzech was only careful when he was genuinely concerned rather than performing concern for political reasons. Rias. I know he's there. I need you to understand something before this goes further. I'm not the problem. There are people moving above my authority level who want this resolved before sunrise. I've bought you until noon. After noon, I'm sending Grayfia. The disc dissolved. Rias sat with her thumb still pressed against nothing and looked at the far wall and did the math of it. Noon, 6 hours. Surzech had bought her 6 hours and had warned her what was coming after, which meant he was on her side in whatever way a Satan could be on a side while still operating within the machinery of his office. Grayfia was not a threat. Grayfia was a statement. Sending his queen to Q meant Surzech was demonstrating to the people above his authority level that he was taking the situation seriously, while simultaneously choosing the one person he trusted absolutely to handle it without it becoming a catastrophe. It was elegant politics. Rias got up, went to the window, and looked at the east wing. The light in the second-floor guest room was already on. Naruto had been awake since 5. Not from anxiety, from habit, and from the fact that his new sensory range made sleeping in a strange building feel like sleeping with all the lights on, bright with information, everything new and interesting and worthy of attention. He'd lain in the too-sharp morning dark for an hour processing the overnight activity in the wards, 2 minor adjustments that Akeno had made from somewhere in the building at around 3 in the morning, small and precise and unnecessary in a security sense, the kind of adjustments you make when you can't sleep and your hands want to do something useful. He'd gotten up and found the kitchen on the second floor by following the smell of coffee, which was the oldest and most reliable navigation system available. Kaneko was in the kitchen. She was sitting at the counter eating cereal with the methodical focus of someone for whom eating was a task to be completed correctly, and she looked up when he came in and looked at him for a long moment and then looked back at her cereal. "Coffee's ready," she said. "Thanks." He poured a cup, found the window seat and sat in it, facing east as she'd apparently expected, watching the sky do the slow mathematics of becoming morning. "You sleep some," she said. "You were evaluating me all night." A pause. "Yes." Conclusion. She considered this with the seriousness of someone who doesn't give conclusions lightly. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something more dangerous." He looked at her. "I am dangerous." "I know," she said. "That's not what I mean." She finished the last of her cereal, set the bowl aside, folded her hands on the counter. "I expected dangerous the way things that don't know what they are dangerous. Uncontrolled. You're dangerous the way things that know exactly what they are dangerous. That's different." He held her gaze. She held his without apparent effort, which he respected enormously. Kaneko did not do things by accident, and holding his gaze right now with full awareness of what he was a choice. "How long have you been Rias Rook?" he asked. 4 years. You trust her?" "Yes." "Good," he said simply. "So do I." "Or I'm getting there." He looked back out the window. "She's going to need people who trust her for what's coming." Kaneko was quiet for a moment. "What is coming?" "Noise," he said. "A lot of it. And then, if we do it right, quiet." She seemed to accept this as a complete answer, which he appreciated because it was the most complete one he had. Rias told him about the summons at 8 over the second round of coffee, with Akeno present and Kiba leaning in the doorway. She told it plainly without drama. Surzech, the 6-hour window, Grayfia. Naruto listened with his elbows on the table. "Tell me about Grayfia," he said. Rias and Akeno exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation compressed into approximately a second and a half. "She's the strongest queen in the devil world," Rias said. "Her power in ice and water is unmatched. She's been Surzech's queen for a very long time. She's also his wife." A slight pause. "She's the most controlled person I've ever met. She's never lost a fight," Kiba said from the doorway conversationally, "not on record." "The record is incomplete," Akeno said, in a tone that implied the incompleteness was not accidental. "What does she want?" Naruto asked. "What Surzech wants," Rias said, "which is to assess you. To bring information back, to give the people who are frightened of you something more accurate to be frightened of or not." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "She won't attack unless you give her a reason." "I won't give her a reason," he stood up. "I'm going to walk around the school before she gets here." "Is that allowed?" "You're an ally," Rias said. "The school is part of the alliance." "Then I'll be back by noon." Q Academy in the early morning before students arrived had a completely different character than it would have in an hour, quieter, softer, without the organized noise of institutional life. Naruto walked it slowly. The grounds were larger than they looked from the gate, with a section behind the main building that was partly given over to garden and partly to something that had started as garden and evolved into an honest, comfortable wilderness, the kind of green space that had been allowed to negotiate its own terms. He sat on a stone bench at the edge of this space and ate the toast he'd made and thought about Grayfia Lucifuge. He knew the name from the letter, which had been careful and precise about the major players in current devil politics. Grayfia was not just Surzech's queen in the chess-piece sense. She was the operational center of his entire household, the person through whom everything that needed to actually functioned. She had been Surzech's queen before she was his wife, which was a fact the letter had included with a specific notation. Her devotion is not romantic in origin, and whatever it has become since, she has never been a person who makes choices casually. She chose Surzech. She chooses the devil world. Everything she does is a choice, and that makes her very different from people who simply do what they are. He'd turned that over several times since reading it. He was still turning it over when he felt the ward at the school's perimeter register a new entry, clean and precise, no force, no attempt to go through the layers. Whoever had just arrived had clearance, had been given the key to walk through rather than the challenge of pushing through. Surzech had clearly sent the code ahead. He ate the last of the toast. He felt her cross the courtyard. Her signature in the devil sense was exactly as the letter had implied, winter clear and absolutely controlled, the way very cold water is controlled, contained by its own density. She moved through the school building at a pace that was unhurried without being slow, and she did not go to the third-floor club room first. She came outside. She came directly to the garden. He didn't turn around when she arrived because he'd heard her footsteps on the path 15 seconds before she stopped walking, and turning around would have implied surprise, and he wasn't surprised. "You felt me come in," she said, a statement. "Through the ward," he confirmed. "You walk quietly." Yes, her voice was as controlled as her power signature, measured and low, with the quality of something that has been precisely calibrated. "You knew I was heading here rather than inside. You're an outdoor assessment person," he said. "You wanted the space. Inside it would be too much like a meeting." He moved sideways on the bench, making room. "Sit down if you want, or don't. I'm not going anywhere." A pause, then she sat. Not close, not far, a measured distance. The distance of someone who has been trained to maintain the appropriate space and has maintained it for so long it no longer feels like training. He looked at her properly now for the first time. She was precisely what her signature had suggested, something controlled into stillness, with silver hair worn in a way that was elegant and entirely functional and gray eyes that were the color of January sky, and a face that had been beautiful long enough that it had stopped caring about being beautiful and was now simply itself. She was wearing traveling clothes, not formal attire, which meant she'd moved fast to get here before the morning aged. "You're younger than I expected," she said. "I'm 17. "I know your age," she said. "I mean your face." "You're very young," she said it without condescension, with a quality closer to surprise. "You expected someone older?" he asked. "I expected someone more." A brief pause. "Armored," she said. "People who carry what you carry usually look like they're carrying it." "I didn't know I was carrying it until last night," he said. "Maybe I'll look more tired in a month." She looked at him steadily. He looked back with equal steadiness, and the thing about Naruto's steadiness was that it had no performance in it. It wasn't practiced, wasn't constructed, wasn't the result of training. It was just what happened when someone had no armor to arrange between themselves and the world. He looked at her the way you look at someone you're genuinely trying to understand. Something shifted in her expression, small, barely perceptible, a kind of recalibration. "Surzech sent me to assess you," she said. "I know, and to determine whether the council's fears have a legitimate basis." "They have a legitimate basis," he said, "just not the right conclusion." He turned to face her more directly. "You're going to ask me to demonstrate power, to give you something verifiable to bring back?" "Yes." "And you're also going to try to determine whether I'm controllable?" A slight pause. "Yes. I'm not," he said pleasantly, "but I'm reasonable. Those are different things, and I suspect you know the difference better than most people." She was quiet for a moment. "Surzech said you were direct." "Surzech hasn't met me." "No, but your father was direct too, from all accounts." She held his gaze when she said it, not as a test, not as a provocation, but as a piece of information she was offering, something she knew and was giving him access to. Lucifer was the most direct of the four Satans. It caused considerable difficulty politically. "Tell me something useful about him," Naruto said. "Not the political record, something real." She considered this for a long moment, and he watched her consider it, watched her decide whether to give it, and why, and what it meant that he'd asked this particular question rather than one about power or politics. "He was kind," she said finally. "In situations where kindness was not strategically indicated, he would stop a negotiation to ask after someone's health and mean it. It confused people." Another pause. "It was considered a weakness." "It wasn't." Naruto held this, turned it over, set it somewhere near the line about the humor at inappropriate moments, and felt his parents assemble themselves slightly more fully in his chest. "Now assess me," he said. "Whatever you need to do, I'll cooperate." Grayfia reached into her jacket and withdrew a small crystal, an assessment tool, the kind used for measuring devil power output with precision, and set it on the bench between them. "If you allow this to read you, I can bring back a clean report. Verifiable data rather than subjective description." "Go ahead." She activated it. It began reading immediately, quietly, the crystal cycling through its analysis frequencies, and then it stopped cycling and did something crystals like this were not designed to do, which was to simply emit a steady, clear light that intensified gradually past the scale it was built to measure. The light reached maximum calibration in about 4 seconds, then the crystal cracked cleanly down the middle. Grayfia looked at the two pieces. "I have 8 more of those," she said after a moment. "We could break all of them," he offered, "or you could just take my word for it." "I'll take your word for it," she said, in a tone so dry it almost had flavor. She put the pieces away, looked at him. "The 4 bloodlines are unified, not layered, unified, as in integrated, not coexisting." "That's what the letter said." "The letter," she said it with a specific weight. "I knew the letter existed. I didn't know it had been delivered." She was quiet for a moment, and what moved through her face in that quiet was complex, not emotion exactly, but the pressure of something held very carefully for a long time. "Surzech suspected your existence for 4 years. I've known for 2. Naruto looked at her. "And you said nothing." "I was waiting," she said. "For what?" "For you to be ready," she said. "Or for the seal to break and make readiness irrelevant." She looked at him steadily. "I told Surzech about you 6 months ago. He's been working to contain the council's more extreme members ever since." "He's been protecting me," Naruto said slowly, "without knowing me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because," Grayfia said, and for the first time something in her voice dropped below the precise control level, became something more direct and more human. "Your father was the best of them. The best of all 4 Satans, and I don't mean the most powerful, I mean the best. And Surzech was 11 years old when Lucifer died, and he has spent every year since then trying to do what Lucifer would have done because it was the best model he had." She paused. "He hoped you'd be worth protecting. I wanted to verify that for myself." The garden was very quiet. Somewhere in the building, the first students were beginning to arrive for morning classes, a low tide of noise at the building's far edge. "And?" Naruto asked. She looked at him for a long moment. "You're worth protecting," she said, "but you don't need to be protected. That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed, "it's not. I'm going to tell Surzech what I found here. He'll use it to hold the council's official channels. But Lord Fenix operates outside official channels. The council he runs is a private faction, not a governmental body. Surzech can't legislate against it." She folded her hands in her lap. "He's going to move again? The 4 operatives you handled last night were a first assessment. The next wave will be different." "How different?" "Fenix has access to a weapon," she said, and here her voice took on a quality that was almost reluctant, the quality of someone delivering information they wish weren't true. "It's been called the Cage of Original Sin. It was built specifically for this scenario, a device designed to fracture the unified 4-fold bloodline from the inside. It doesn't kill. It dismantles." A pause. "It was made 300 years ago in anticipation of exactly this, which tells you how long the council has been preparing." Naruto was quiet for a moment. "Can it be destroyed?" "It's a conceptual weapon," Grayfia said. "It can't be destroyed by force. It can only be countered by something that predates the concept it's built around." "Which is the fragmentation of the 4 bloodlines," Naruto said slowly. "So to counter it, I'd need to demonstrate that the unification isn't fragile, that it's not just coexistence but something genuinely new." He paused. "Something the weapon wasn't built to anticipate." "That's the theory," she said. "It's untested. Most things I've done in the last 12 hours have been untested." Something happened at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, a fraction of the machinery of a smile, visible for half a second before she brought it back under control. "Your father would have said something like that. Did you know him?" Naruto asked. "Personally," she was quiet for a moment. "I knew him the way junior members of the household know a great house's patriarch. From a distance and mostly by his reputation and its effects." Another pause. "He noticed me once, at a formal reception when I was very young. He said my ice work had a quality that most ice users lost when they joined formal service, that it still looked like mine and not like the academy's." She said this flatly, but the flatness was doing work. "I don't know why I remember it so specifically. I suppose no one had said something like that to me before." "He was right," Naruto said. "Your work still looks like yours. I could tell it from the ward layers here. There's something in how you build ice that's personal. The same way Akeno's lightning work is personal." Grayfia looked at him. He watched the process of her deciding how to respond to this, the brief, visible sequence of evaluation of what does this mean, what is the appropriate response, what does it mean that I am considering this question at all, and then she simply said, "Thank you." "You don't take compliments easily," he said. "I've had limited practice," she said in a tone that was almost wry. "We can work on that," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm Surzech's queen," she said. "I have a function, a role, responsibilities that—" "I know what you are," he said, the same words he'd used to Rias the night before, but different now, carrying something she hadn't heard from many people. "I'm telling you that you're also something else. You're allowed to be both." She was very still. Not the controlled stillness, a different kind, the kind that happens when something you've been pushing against for a long time suddenly isn't there anymore, and you haven't figured out what to do with the absence yet. "I should compile my report," she said. "I know." She didn't move for another moment. Then she stood, smoothed her jacket with the precision of someone restoring order to something that had become briefly disordered, and looked at him from standing height with those January sky eyes. "There is one more thing," she said. "The council has a contact inside QO, someone who provided updated information about the ward structure here, someone with access to the school." Naruto went still. "You know who?" "I have a strong suspicion. I don't have confirmation." She paused. "I'm telling you this rather than Rias because Rias will react emotionally, which is appropriate but counterproductive at this stage. You won't." "Who is it?" "Deodora Asteroth," she said. "He's been in correspondence with Fenix for 3 months. He wants leverage over the Gremory Heir, and you represent leverage in multiple directions." She held his gaze. "He doesn't know I know. That's the only advantage we have." "Thank you," Naruto said. "Don't thank me yet." She turned to go, stopped, didn't turn back but spoke toward the garden path. "When this is resolved, if it's resolved, I may return to QO in an unofficial capacity." "I'd like that," he said. She walked away with the precise, unhurried stride that was entirely her own, and he watched her go through the green space of the school garden, and thought about what it meant to be a person who had been so thoroughly defined by service that the outline of themselves had started to blur, and about how you recovered an outline, and whether it was something you could do alone or whether you needed someone to reflect it back to you. He sat for another few minutes, then he went inside. He found Rias in the clubroom, standing at the window with her arms folded and the specific posture of someone who has been trying to see something in the middle distance and failing to locate it. She turned when he came in, and there was a question on her face that she asked the moment he was through the door. "How did it go?" "Well," he said, "she's thorough." "She didn't." "You're not." "I'm fine," he said. "She came to assess. I let her assess. We had a conversation." He moved to the table, sat down in the same chair as the night before, faced her. "She told me something I need to tell you, and I need you to listen to all of it before you react." Ria's expression shifted, the composed heiress face sliding into place, which was not coldness but professionalism, the version of herself she wore when she needed to be steady. "Tell me." He told her about Deodora. He told it plainly and completely, without cushioning it, because Grayfia had trusted him to transmit it accurately, and because Rias deserved the full information rather than a managed version of it. He watched her receive it, watched the stillness that wasn't calm but was control, the tightening at the corners of her eyes, the one breath she took and let out slowly. "How long?" she said. 3 months, according to Grayfia. 3 months. She was quiet. Something moved through her that was anger, and underneath it something more personal, the specific hurt of betrayal, which hit differently than straightforward attack because it had to get through the trust first. "He attended our joint faculty meeting last month. He was in this building. He was feeding the council ward information," Naruto said. "Not about us directly, about the school's general structure. So they knew where to direct their operatives." She looked at him. "Last night. The 4 who came for me knew exactly where I'd be," he confirmed. "The address in the text I received, someone gave them my location before I texted it. They were already mobilizing when your text reached me." He paused. "I don't think Deodora expected me to handle them. I think he expected the operatives to remove me before you and I ever met." Rias absorbed this. Her hands uncrossed, dropped to her sides, the posture shifting from composed to something more genuinely ready. "He's at his school in the neighboring district. He has a peerage. I know, I don't want to move against him yet." He held up a hand to forestall her objection. "If we move against him now, Fenix knows Grayfia warned us. That removes Grayfia's advantage and risks blowback on Surzech's. We need to let Deodora think his pipeline to the council is still intact." Rias worked this through. He could see her working it through, the same systematic intelligence that had organized the library documents, that had spent 2 years preparing for this, turning the problem over with the speed and precision of someone who thought in structures. "So we feed him false information," she said. "Selectively," Naruto said. "We let him see things that don't compromise us, things that make the council confident they know what I am and where I'll be. And then we put me somewhere unexpected. You want to use yourself as bait? I want to use myself as a statement," he said. "There's a difference. Bait is passive. What I'm thinking is," he paused, arranging it. "The prophecy says the convergence ends the current order. Fenix believes that means destruction. What if we let him see the convergence in a context so completely unlike what he's afraid of that it breaks the interpretive framework entirely?" Rias looked at him for a long moment. "You want a public demonstration? I want a conversation," he said. "A very visible one." "Fenix won't come to a conversation," she said. "He sends operatives." "He will if the operatives keep not working," Naruto said. "Eventually, a rational person who is very afraid runs out of options and has to try the one they've been avoiding, which is confronting the thing they're afraid of directly." He paused. "He's rational, he's afraid. He's been running the avoidance strategy since before I was born. When it fails consistently enough, he'll escalate to the direct version." He met her eyes. "I want to be ready for that." Rias looked at him across the table in the clubroom, with the morning light coming through the window behind her, and the letter-organized documents still spread across the surface between them, and an expression on her face that he was beginning to recognize as the one she wore when something clicked into place for her in a way she hadn't expected. "You've been thinking like this all morning," she said. "Since about 5:30, he confirmed. "You slept 3 hours. I think fast." She shook her head slightly, not in disagreement, in something closer to involuntary amusement that she wasn't quite able to suppress. "We need to talk to Akeno and Kiba. If we're going to do this, we bring everyone in," he agreed. "No information asymmetry, everyone knows everything, including Deodora's role, especially that." He stood. "Where's Akeno?" "Where she always is when she's thinking," Rias said. She moved toward the door. "The roof." The school roof had the best view in Q, the city spread below in the particular morning clarity of October when the air had been cleaned by overnight cold and everything sat sharp and distinct against the sky. Akeno was standing at the low wall at the roof's edge with her hair loose around her shoulders, not doing anything in particular, which meant she was doing something internal, processing something in the deep way that looked from the outside like stillness. She turned when they came through the roof access door, looked at Naruto first, then Rias, and read something in the combination of them, two people who had been talking, who had moved past the initial phase of figuring each other out into something more collaborative, the shift from parallel lines to intersecting ones. Grayfia left, she said. She'll be back, Naruto said. Something moved through Akeno's expression. She said that, not in so many words. Akeno looked at him steadily. She never comes back to things. Grayfia commits, executes, moves on. She doesn't revisit. She will this time, he said simply. Akeno held his gaze. She had the quality, he'd noticed it the night before, and it was no less striking now in the daylight with the city spread behind her, of someone who was accustomed to reading people, and was encountering a person who was harder to read than their straightforwardness suggested, because the straightforwardness itself was the complexity. Most people had layers you had to get through to reach the real thing. Naruto had no layers, and somehow that was more disorienting than layers would have been, because there was nothing to work through, nowhere to push that gave way into something more guarded. What you saw was what he was, completely. You talked about more than the assessment, she said. You and Grayfia. We talked about my father, he said, and hers a little by implication. He paused. She's been carrying things for a long time. I think she needed someone to notice. She's the great King Satan's queen. She's a person, he said. Same thing I said about Rias last night. Same thing, I mean, the role and the person aren't the same thing, and the person is what I'm interested in. Akeno was quiet for a moment. The October wind moved her hair. Behind her, the city did its morning business in complete ignorance of everything happening on this roof. What are you interested in about me? She asked. It was not quite a challenge, not quite a question either, occupying the difficult space between them, carrying more weight than its words suggested. You already know the answer to that, he said. Tell me anyway. The thing in your lightning work that's yours and not the academy's, he said. You, what you actually are when you're not deciding what to show people. He held her gaze evenly. Which is considerably more interesting than the version you show people, which is already interesting. She looked at him for a long, slow moment. The half-smile was not in evidence. What was there instead was something more unguarded, not quite vulnerable, because Akeno Himejima did not do vulnerability lightly or quickly, but something in the direction of it, a pressure on the inside of the guard. You don't know me yet, she said. No, he agreed. I'd like to. Rias, to her credit, had been looking at the city view with complete focus and not at either of them for the last 30 seconds, which was a display of tact that Naruto appreciated. We have a problem, he said, and then told Akeno about Deodora, and watched her face go through the same sequence as Rias, but faster and colder, and with a quality that was specifically personal. She and Deodora had history, he realized, reading it in the way her expression settled into something that was the opposite of surprise. He's been watching this school for longer than 3 months, she said when he finished. I know, Rias said quietly. He's been watching us, Akeno said. Me specifically. She turned to Naruto. He made an approach 2 years ago. Rias handled it. He's been looking for leverage since. He thinks you're leverage against Rias, Naruto said. He's not wrong, Akeno said. The two of us. She stopped, restarted. I'm not going to apologize for being something someone could use as leverage against someone I care about. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm saying he's wrong, not about the strength of what you two have, but about what he can do with it. He looked at her steadily. You're not leverage. You're the reason this works. There's a difference. Akeno looked at him for a moment longer than she'd intended to, he thought. Then she turned back to the city view and put both hands on the low wall and said in her normal voice, the warm one with the pleasant edge, so we deceive Deodora and we build a trap for Phoenix. What do we need? Time, Naruto said. And the library. We have both, Rias said. Then we start today. He moved to stand beside Akeno at the wall, looking out at the city that was his city now. He decided not the one he'd grown up in, which had always been the wrong size, but this one, this warded, complicated, three-faction city with its secrets stacked inside secrets, and a school at its heart that was growing into the exact right size for what he was. One more thing. What? Rias asked from his other side. Someone should tell the council I'm enrolled here starting Monday, he said. Officially with my full name. Silence from both of them. You want them to know exactly where you are, Akeno said. I want to stop being a rumor, he said. The prophecy is about a convergence. A convergence is a thing that happens somewhere at some time to some people. The council's been fighting an abstraction. He looked out at the city. Let them fight a student. Rias made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh she'd suppressed and a breath she'd released. You're going to enroll in Q Academy to force a confrontation with an ancient devil council. "I'm going to enroll in Q Academy," he said, "because I'd quite like a normal morning for once. The confrontation is a side effect." Akeno laughed, the real version, full and unguarded, surprised out of her by the straightforwardness of it. It was a beautiful sound, he thought, in the way things are beautiful when they're fully themselves without attempting to be. The city lay below them, sharp and clear in October light. They had work to do. Chapter 4. The storm inside her. 3 weeks into his enrollment at Q Academy, Naruto had broken 4 desks, not intentionally. The first had been during a literature class when the teacher had asked a question about Hamlet and Naruto had leaned forward with genuine interest and put his elbow through the surface, which was embarrassing in the way that things are embarrassing when everyone pretends not to have noticed. The second and third had been in the same day, a Thursday, when he'd been calibrating his passive output during a free period and had miscalculated twice in a row, which he chose to interpret as evidence of growth rather than consistent failure. The fourth had been Kiba's fault. The school had absorbed these events with the equanimity of an institution that had been managing the impossible for years and had developed institutional muscle memory around it. The desk in the literature class had been replaced by the next morning. No report had been filed. A woman in the administration office named Matsuda-san had looked at Naruto over her glasses the second time he'd come to her desk about furniture and had said, with the specific resignation of someone who has made their peace with the inexplicable, "We have extras." He'd been careful since then, mostly. The cover story for his enrollment was straightforward enough to be convincing and vague enough not to invite scrutiny: transfer student, distant family connection to the Kyoto district, catching up on the local curriculum. Rias had handled the paperwork with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before, which she had, for most of her peerage. Naruto had the impression that the administrative layer of Q Academy operated on the quiet understanding that some questions had answers that were better left unasked, and that this understanding was part of what made the school function. Students had opinions about him, which was inevitable. He was new, he was conspicuous, and he had the quality, the thing underneath his skin that was always cycling, always present, that humans without sacred gears or any connection to the supernatural registered not as supernatural, but as simply significant, as someone who mattered without being able to say why. He was used to this in his old life in the abstract sense of having always felt slightly out of place. But the experience of having people consistently look at him and not be able to stop looking was new, and he navigated it with the same straightforwardness he navigated everything. He ate lunch in whatever space was available. He answered questions directly. He borrowed a pencil from the girl in front of him in homeroom on his first day without ceremony because he'd forgotten his, and she'd handed it over with the slightly dazed expression of someone doing a completely ordinary thing that felt inexplicably like an event. He was, by the end of the first week, somewhat popular in the specific way of people who seem genuinely comfortable with themselves, which is the scarcest form of popularity because it asks nothing of anyone. The mission came on a Saturday, 3 weeks in. Rias laid it out in the club room on Friday evening, a stray devil situation in the industrial district, the southeastern edge of Q, where the warehouses and old manufacturing buildings sat in the comfortable disuse of things that had been important once. 3 stray reports, same general area over 2 weeks. Standard peerage work, the kind of operational maintenance that was part of devil life in the human world. Clean and straightforward, she said, in and out. "I'll come," Naruto said. Rias looked at him. "You don't have to, this is peerage work, the formal obligation runs through me." "I know," he said. "I want to." She held his gaze briefly, then nodded. "Akeno and Kiba on point. Kaneko rear." "Naruto," she paused, deciding something with Akeno. Akeno, who was sitting on the arm of the chair that had become specifically hers over the course of 3 weeks, looked up from the book she was holding and met Rias' eyes, and something passed between them that was fast and complete and that Naruto filed away without pressing. "Fine," Akeno said pleasantly. They went out at 10. The industrial district at night had the bones of what it used to be, the skeletal shapes of loading cranes against the sky, the long warehouse faces with their high, dark windows, the pavement cracked by years of weight and time. The streetlights were spaced too far apart, the darkness between them genuine rather than performed, the kind of dark that had nothing to hide and didn't need to. The stray devil announced itself before they'd covered 100 meters into the district. Not subtly, a sound that was more feeling than hearing, a displacement of the air, and then the first one came through the wall of a warehouse to their left, like the wall had been a suggestion rather than a structure. It was large and badly formed, the kind of devil that had lost coherence the way things lose coherence when they've been untethered too long, features present but disordered, power cycling without direction. Kiba moved first, which was his natural position, and the first devil was handled in 30 seconds with the clean, economical efficiency of someone who had done this enough times that the technique had become pure. The second came from above, from the crane structure overhead, and Akeno lifted one hand and put a column of lightning through it that left the air smelling of ozone and ended the issue definitively. Third didn't come immediately. They spread through the district, loose formation searching. The night was cold and still. Naruto walked beside Akeno, their footsteps occasionally sinking without either of them deciding to, and she was doing the thing she did in operations that was different from the thing she did in the school, a quality of focus, a specific attention, the warmth of her usual presence compressed into something sharper and more directed. "You're lightning," he said quietly because they had time and space for it. "What about it? You hold back even here," he said, "against strays." She was quiet for 2 steps. "I use what's necessary." "You use less than necessary," he said. "The second stray you hit it at maybe 40%. It was sufficient." "I know, that's not my point." He kept his voice easy without push. "Your full output is something you reserve." "Why?" She looked at him sideways, and there was something in the look that was not quite defensive but was aware of itself in the way people are aware of things they've chosen not to examine. "It unsettles people," she said, "the full version, because of the fallen angel component. Because of what it looks like when I stop managing it," she said, "when I actually let it go." "Show me," he said. She stopped walking, looked at him fully. In the dark of the industrial district with the warehouse shapes around them and the cold October air, November now, technically, November had arrived without ceremony 3 days ago, she looked at him the way she'd looked at him on the roof, that unguarded pressure behind the guard. "You don't want to see that," she said. The warmth was gone from her voice, not replaced by cold, by something more honest, something she showed very few people. "I do," he said simply. "It's not," she stopped, started again. "There's a reason I manage it, there's a reason I keep it Akeno." He said her name, just her name, without anything attached to it, and she stopped. "I'm afraid of it," she said. It came out quietly, without ceremony, the way true things often come out when you've stopped trying to make them presentable. "I'm afraid of what I am when I stop managing what I am." He held her gaze, the night was still around them. "What are you afraid it looks like?" "Her," she said, "my mother." A pause. "I'm not going to explain the whole thing." "You don't have to, but there's a part of me that comes from her and from my father, and when I use the full version of what I can do, that part it's loud. And I'm not sure she stopped again. "I'm not sure it's good." "Is power good or bad?" he asked. "That's too simple." "Probably," he agreed, "but I'm not asking about power in general. I'm asking about yours specifically." He took a step toward her, not crowding, just closing the distance of the conversation slightly. "I've felt your work in the wards for 3 weeks. I've watched you train, I've felt the shape of what you can do at the level you allow it." He paused. "It's extraordinary, Akeno, the full version, the thing you're afraid of. I don't think it looks like something bad." "I think it looks like you?" She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes that was complicated and deep, and that she was clearly navigating in real time, feeling her way through it the way you feel your way through something you've always moved around rather than through. "What if you're wrong?" she said. "Then I'll still be right here," he said. The third stray devil saved them both from what came next. It erupted from the ground 30 meters ahead, larger than the first 2, clearly the anchor of the group, the source the others had been cycling around. It was genuinely dangerous, not dramatically but practically, the way a structural problem in a building is dangerous, not aggressive, just present and wrong, and capable of considerable damage if left unaddressed. Akeno turned toward it, and this time she didn't manage it. What came out of her was not the controlled, calibrated lightning she'd deployed for 20 seconds against the second stray. It was something wider and more complex, carrying both frequencies, the devil and the fallen angel, the inherited and the chosen, the parts of herself she'd kept separated for years brought together in a single expression that had no precedent in anything she'd deployed before. It was extraordinary. Stray Devil was resolved in approximately 1 second. What lingered was the aftermath of the lightning, the air charged and bright, the shapes of the warehouse buildings lit in a sharp, stuttering clarity, and Akeno standing in the middle of it with her arms slightly away from her body and her hair stirred by the static, looking like exactly what she was, which was something powerful and specific and entirely herself. She turned to look at him. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Whatever she saw on his face, not awe, not the performance of being impressed, not the reflexive discomfort she'd seen before from people who'd glimpsed the full version, whatever she saw, something loosened in her, not dramatically. "A thread being released. Satisfied?" she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite the usual lilt. It was softer than that, more uncertain. "You're not your mother," he said, "or your father. You're both of them and neither of them, and specifically yourself, and what I just saw was proof of that." She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she looked away at the cleared air of the industrial district, at the ordinary, untroubled dark that had settled back in after the lightning. "You're inconvenient," she said, and there was something wry and real in it. "I know," he agreed. "Are you all right?" She paused. "I'm fine, yes." Another pause, smaller, "Thank you." They walked back to meet the others in a silence that was different from the silences before it. Kiba found them with the news before they'd left the district. He came out of the dark between two warehouses moving fast, which was not his usual mode, and when he reached them, the controlled expression he maintained in operations had developed a crack in it. "We have a problem," he said. "There's a fifth stray, but it's not a stray." Naruto felt it the second Kiba said it, the signature in the southeast corner of the district, behind the largest of the warehouse structures that he'd been registering as background for the last 10 minutes and had classified as environmental noise. He reclassified it now. It wasn't noise, it was something that had been very carefully presenting as noise. "How many?" he asked. "I count 3 non-stray signatures," Kiba said. "Council grade, they've been here since before we arrived." This was the setup, Naruto said. Rias and Kaneko materialized from the north, having felt the recalibration in the group's awareness. Rias looked at Naruto. "The stray reports were real," he said. "But they were also the lure. Someone fed the council our operational calendar." He paused. "Deodora," Ria's expression tightened. "It doesn't matter right now," Naruto said. "What matters right now is what's behind that warehouse." He went first, because it was his situation and his fight, and because there was no version of this where he stood behind people while his problems were handled. He came around the corner of the warehouse with his hands in his jacket pockets, which was perhaps a slightly dramatic way to present, but he decided he was comfortable with it. The 3 council operatives were not the type that had come to his apartment. These were older, more senior, their power signatures dense and settled in the way of people who had been at this for a long time. They were in a loose triangle formation, which was smart, and they had a device with them, an octagonal frame of black metal, perhaps a meter across, suspended between 2 of them with chains that were made of something Naruto didn't entirely have a name for but could feel distantly as antagonistic. The cage of original sin, not deployed, held a threat rather than an attack, which meant they'd come to negotiate or to demonstrate leverage before they used it. That was interesting. That was a different posture than assassination. The one in the center, older male with the bearing of someone accustomed to institutional authority, looked at Naruto with the specific, focused attention of a person who has prepared carefully for a meeting they hope to control. "Naruto Uzumaki," he said, "we've come with an offer rather than a conflict." "Tell it to me," Naruto said. "Voluntary compliance," the man said. "You undergo a procedure that separates the 4 bloodlines. Not destruction, division. Each line is preserved in a separate vessel. The balance is restored. The prophecy is fulfilled without catastrophe." A pause. "You live reduced but functional." Naruto looked at the cage. Looked at the man, looked at the other 2. "Phoenix sent you," he said. "Lord Phoenix represents a broader consensus." "Lord Phoenix is afraid," Naruto said. "I understand why. I'm not going to insult his intelligence by pretending the fear is irrational. But this," he nodded toward the cage, "this is what happens when rational fear is given enough time to build an irrational solution." "The procedure would kill me," Naruto said flatly. "Not immediately. But separating a unified 4-fold bloodline from the inside is not a division, it's a demolition. We both know that." He looked at the man. "Who told you it was reversible?" "Because whoever told you that was lying to you." A flicker. Small but real, the man had doubts about exactly this, and Naruto had just named them in front of his colleagues. "It's a theoretical. Let me ask you something," Naruto said. "The procedure requires the cage. The cage was built 300 years ago by the same faction that's been running your council since before anyone currently alive joined it. Does that not give you any pause? You're using a tool built by people who are dead for a purpose they defined to solve a problem they described, and you've trusted all 3 of those things without examining whether any of them were accurate." The man was quiet. "Phoenix is afraid of the prophecy," Naruto said, "but the prophecy doesn't say what you've decided it says. Rias Gremory has been telling you that for years through the appropriate channels, and the appropriate channels have been very good at not hearing it." He paused. "What does the prophecy actually say?" "The original text, not the council's translation. This is not the time for it. Says the convergence will end the order that fear built," Naruto said. Not the devil world, not civilization, not life, the order that fear built, which is the council's interpretation of the prophecy, which is itself the thing the prophecy was describing. He looked at all three of them. It was describing itself. The order that fear built is the doctrine you're operating from. The convergence doesn't end the world, it ends the doctrine. Behind him, he felt Rias go very still. She knew the original text, had found the reference 8 months ago, she'd told him, but hadn't been sure of her own translation. He'd found the same reference in the library during his 3rd day of searching and had spent a week sitting with it before he was certain. The lead operative's composure was doing something complicated. Not breaking, he was too trained for that, but reorganizing like a building adjusting to a foundation shift. Even if that interpretation is correct, the man said, slower now, the council's position. The council's position is that I'm a threat, Naruto said. I'm telling you I'm not a threat, and I understand that's exactly what a threat would say, so let me demonstrate it differently. He took his hands out of his pockets. I'm going to stand here in front of you with no aggressive intent, and I'm going to let you feel what I am. Not the power, the nature of it. What it's actually doing. The man looked at him. You felt the force signature in the apartment reports, Naruto said. You felt it as danger because it was context-free, just power, unexplained, unexpected. Feel it now with context, feel it in a conversation, feel what it actually is. He opened his presence, not a demonstration, not a display, just an opening of the thing he usually kept at rest. The fourfold unified power cycled into its visible expression, the temperature shift, the light bend, the gravity pull, and all of it, everything was calm. Not restrained, not suppressed. Calm, the way something is calm when it is exactly where it belongs, doing exactly what it's meant to do. The lead operative stood in it for a long moment, then quietly to the others, stand down. Neither of them moved against the instruction. The cage lowered, not released, they held it still, but the deployment posture dropped from it. I can't promise the council accepts this, the man said, and he sounded suddenly and genuinely tired. The tiredness of someone who has been very afraid for a long time and has just been shown, maybe, that there was less to be afraid of than they thought. Lord Phoenix won't come himself until he has to, Naruto said. I know, that's fine, you'll tell him what you felt tonight, that's enough for now. He paused. Tell him something else. What? Tell him I want to meet him, Naruto said. Not to fight, not to prove anything. I want to understand what he's afraid of completely and directly. Because I think if he meets me, the fear changes into something more accurate, and more accurate fear can be worked with. He held the man's gaze. Will you tell him that? A long moment. Yes, the man said. I'll tell him. They left. The cage went with them, still closed, still a possibility, but carried differently, less like a weapon being transported and more like an argument being reconsidered. Naruto turned back to the group. Rias was looking at him with an expression that had several components. Kiba had the look of someone who had just watched something they hadn't expected. Kaneko was Kaneko, processing precise, eyes slightly wider than usual. Akeno was looking at him from slightly apart from the others, standing in the space she'd been standing when she'd released the lightning, and she had on her face the expression that was not quite the unguarded version but was very close to it, that pressure behind the guard. The original text, Rias said, the order that fear built, you found it. Day 3 in the library, he said. I wasn't certain until day 10, I should have told you sooner. No, she said slowly, you were right to wait until you were certain. She looked at him with that genuine face, the argument in progress one, working through something. You've been building this entire strategy around that translation. Around what the fear actually is, he said. Phoenix isn't evil, he's wrong, and the difference matters. Rias was quiet for a moment. Something in her expression settled, not relief, something more structural than relief, like a load-bearing question getting an answer. She'd been working on this for 2 years, carrying it, building toward an understanding that had arrived not through more research but through the person who embodied what she was researching. We should go back, she said. Her voice was slightly different, more personal. It's cold. It is cold, Kaneko agreed, which for Kaneko constituted strong agreement. They walked back through the district toward school, the group loosening from operational formation into something more ordinary. Kiba fell into conversation with Kaneko about something Naruto didn't track. Rias was ahead, her red hair dark in the night air, moving with the purposeful stride of someone processing and walking simultaneously. Naruto fell into step beside Akeno. They walked for most of a block in silence. The original text, she said eventually, the order that fear built, is that really what it says? Exactly what it says, he confirmed. Rias translated it too. She was close. She said current order, but the word in the original is specifically qualified. Fear constructed order. It's unambiguous if you know the dialect. She didn't tell us, Akeno said. She wasn't certain. She needed to be certain before she said it. He paused. That's fair. Akeno was quiet for a step. You protected her tonight. In front of the operatives, you used her research without making it hers in a way they could leverage against her. He hadn't thought about it in those terms, but she was right. It came up naturally. It doesn't come up naturally for most people, she said, protecting someone without making it visible. I wasn't protecting her, he said. I was using the most accurate version of the truth I had. She helped me find it. Akeno walked in silence for a moment. You do that, she said. You say things that are simpler than they are and they're true, and somehow the simplicity makes them more true than a complex version would be. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, she said. I'm still deciding what to do with it. Fair, he said, a pause, and then, earlier in the district, what I showed you. Yes. I haven't done that in front of someone and not had a reaction to the reaction, she said carefully. I've always known after what the person thought of it, fear or awe or discomfort or something. Tonight I didn't feel any of those things from you, because I wasn't feeling any of those things, he said. What were you feeling? He thought about it because it deserved actual thought rather than a reflexive answer. Like watching someone come back to themselves, he said, the way a room looks when you open a window that's been closed for too long. She was quiet for long enough that he glanced sideways. She was looking at the path ahead with an expression that he was beginning to be able to read, one she wore when something had gotten through the guard and she was deciding whether to acknowledge it. Naruto, she said. Yeah, she stopped walking. He stopped a half step later and turned. She was facing him on the dark November path with the school visible ahead and the industrial district behind and the cold air between them, and her expression was the most straightforwardly honest he'd seen it. I've been managing what I am for so long, she said, that I've started to confuse the management with the thing being managed. She paused. I don't want to do that anymore. Then don't, he said. It's not that simple. It's not simple at all, he agreed. But that's still the answer, not all at once, not tonight or next week, but the direction you're going in matters more than the speed. He held her gaze. You already changed direction tonight, in the district. She looked at him for a moment longer, then she did something he hadn't seen her do before. She reached out and put her hand briefly, completely naturally on his arm. Not a gesture with intention behind it, not a calculated warmth, just contact, the simplest expression of a connection that was real. Then she took her hand back and started walking, and he fell into step beside her and they reached the school in comfortable silence. The Purification Council's message arrived at midnight. It appeared on Ria's desk the same way Surzech's disc had appeared, materialized, sealed, official. But this seal was not silver and black. It was the deep, aged crimson of old blood, the council's formal mark, and when Rias opened it, she read it once and then set it on the desk and looked at Naruto. Fenix will meet you, she said. His terms, neutral ground, no peerage present within the fortnight. A pause. He specifies that the meeting is a courtesy, not a concession. He wants it understood that the council's position has not changed. It will, Naruto said. You're very confident. I'm right about this, he said. Not everything, this. Rias looked at him across the desk. The lamp between them was warm and low, the room quiet past midnight, and she had the expression she wore when she was about to say something she'd been thinking about for a while. You told the operative tonight that you want to understand what Fenix is afraid of, she said, completely and directly. A pause. That's not strategy, is it? That's actually what you want. Yes, he said. Why does it matter to you what he's afraid of? He thought about the dying messenger and the warm envelope and his parents who had been afraid for him in a room that no longer existed. He thought about Grayfia's face in the garden when Lucifer had been described. He thought about Akeno in the lightning and Kaniko's precise eyes and Rias herself in the library at midnight pulling documents she'd spent 2 years organizing for a person she didn't know yet. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do, he said. It made the council. It hid me for 17 years. It's kept Grayfia in a role that's too small for her and kept Akeno at 40% and kept this school under wards that shouldn't have to carry that much weight. He looked at Rias. If I can change what Fenix is afraid of, not remove the fear, just make it more accurate, everything downstream of that changes too. Rias held his gaze for a long moment. My father was afraid of me inheriting the Gremory name, she said quietly. He hadn't expected it, the personal thing offered without setup. Not of me specifically, of what it would mean for my future. Of the political machinery that would close around me the moment I took the name fully. He arranged a betrothal when I was a child. She paused. I've been fighting that arrangement ever since. Fighting the category it put me in. You're not in that category, he said. I know, she said, but knowing it and feeling it are different things. She looked at him. You make it easier to feel it. The lamp was warm between them. The city was quiet outside. Rias, he said, you've been running this school, managing a peerage, researching a prophecy, preparing for something you didn't know the shape of, fighting a political arrangement you never agreed to, and you've been doing it all simultaneously for years. He held her gaze. Has anyone ever told you that's remarkable? She looked caught, genuinely caught, the composure briefly set aside, the real face visible in the lamplight. My brother, she said after a moment, once. When I was 14, he was right, Naruto said. You're remarkable. She looked at him for a long moment that neither of them tried to fill with anything. Then she looked down at the council's letter and back up at him with something in her expression that was warm and real and slightly confused, in the specific way of someone who has received something genuine and hasn't entirely decided what to do with it yet. We should sleep, she said. We have Phoenix to prepare for. We do, he agreed. He stood, moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame and looked back at her, at the red-haired heiress in the lamplight surrounded by 2 years of preparation wearing her genuine face. Thank you, he said, for all of it, since the beginning. She opened her mouth, closed it, seemed to decide something. Good night, Naruto, she said, and it landed differently than it had 3 weeks ago, the name carrying something new, something that had been added incrementally over 21 days of shared space and shared work, and the small, unrepeatable moments of understanding that accumulate between people who are paying attention to each other. Went to bed. Outside, the November city was cold and still. In the school's wards hummed their layered, familiar harmonics, and in the industrial district the ground had healed over the marks left by the night's work. And somewhere in the devil world a message was traveling toward Lord Phoenix the Elder, carrying a description of what it had felt like to stand in the full presence of the heir of all 4 Satans, not dangerous, not weaponized, simply and completely itself. By morning, Phoenix would have read it. By morning, something in the shape of everything would have begun to change. Chapter 5, All 4 Thrones. The neutral ground Phoenix chose was an island. Not a large one, a flat, gray piece of land in the sea 2 hours northeast of Kyoto, accessible by devil transit in under a minute but remote enough that its isolation read as deliberate. Nothing on it except old stone, coastal grass beaten flat by wind, and the ruins of something that had been a structure once and had made its peace with becoming a landscape. The kind of place chosen by someone who wanted no witnesses and no exits that could be controlled. Naruto arrived alone, which was the agreement, and 10 minutes early, which was his own preference. He stood at the island's center with the sea on all sides and the November sky low and gray overhead and felt, through the extended sense that had become as natural as breathing by now, the exact dimensions of the place. Small, exposed. Nothing hiding anywhere in the rock or the grass or the old stone. He sat down on a piece of fallen wall and waited. NX arrived at precisely the agreed time, which told Naruto something about him, the punctuality of someone for whom control of variables was not a preference but a necessity, who could not afford to be early because early implied eagerness and could not be late because late implied disrespect, and had probably been standing somewhere nearby for 20 minutes waiting for the exact right moment to step through. He was older than Naruto had expected. Not old in the way of someone who had stopped moving, old in the way of something geological, a density of years that had compressed rather than softened. He was tall and spare, wearing a coat that was expensive and very old, and his eyes were the amber of the Phoenix bloodline, the specific gold that held fire in it, and those eyes landed on Naruto with an intensity that was not anger, not hatred, not the cold calculation of an enemy. Pure, undiluted terror, not performed. Not the strategic display of someone showing weakness to invite overconfidence. Phoenix was genuinely, structurally afraid, and he was doing something that Naruto suspected cost him enormously, which was standing there anyway. You're younger than the reports suggested, Phoenix said. People keep saying that, Naruto said. Sit down. Phoenix looked at the fallen wall section, at the informality of it, at the complete absence of the ceremonial architecture that surrounded every interaction at his level of devil society. He sat. Not beside Naruto, across on another stone facing him, which created the structure of a conversation without the structure of a meeting. That was better, Naruto thought. You came alone, Phoenix said, as agreed. My operative said. He stopped. My operative said you told them the meeting would change something. That meeting me would make the fear more accurate. His amber eyes were steady and direct. I want to understand what you meant by that. Tell me what you're afraid of first, Naruto said. The real version, not the doctrine. Phoenix was quiet for a moment. The sea moved around the island in the patient, indifferent way of things that have been moving for longer than the argument above them. The original 4 Satans destroyed each other, he said. Not in the Great War that came after. They destroyed each other first in the years before the war because the convergence of that much power in that kind of proximity created dynamics that couldn't be survived. Lucifer and Leviathan, Asmodeus and Beelzebub, the relationships between them became unstable. The power became unstable. The war was the result of that instability finding an external expression. He paused. You are all 4 of them in a single person, he said. The instability they couldn't survive between 4 separate beings has been collapsed into one. I have spent my entire life, 400 years, believing that the convergence would replicate that destruction on a scale that made the Great War look like a disagreement. Naruto listened to all of it without interruption. Then he said, "Your history is wrong." Phoenix's jaw tightened. "I've studied. The 4 Satans didn't destroy each other," Naruto said. "They chose each other. Deliberately, repeatedly, against every convention and political obstacle the devil world put in their way." He reached into his jacket and put the envelope on the stone between them. "This was written by all 4 of them for me, sealed 17 years ago. They were alive and together when they wrote it." Phoenix looked at the envelope. He did not reach for it. He looked at the seal, the wax, and Naruto felt the recognition move through him, the specific physical response of someone whose foundational assumption has just been touched. "The official record was written by the people who were afraid of them," Naruto said. "The same people who built the council. The same doctrine, the same fear, the same 300-year loop of a story that gets told by the people who needed a certain ending." He held Phoenix's gaze. "My parents didn't destroy themselves, they hid me and died protecting the hiding. Those are different things." Phoenix was very still. "The Great War wasn't caused by their relationship," Naruto continued. "It was caused by the political machinery that formed around trying to control what they were to each other. The instability wasn't internal, it was external pressure building until something gave." He paused. "The council's doctrine was created to prevent a recurrence. But it was created by people who misread the cause, so the prevention they designed addresses the wrong thing. You can't know this," Phoenix said, but it was not the flat dismissal of certainty. It was the sharp, urgent question of someone who desperately needs to know if they're wrong. "The letter says more the second time you read it," Naruto said. "It was written to say more each time it's read by someone with the right blood." "I've read it 11 times, he paused. "On the 9th reading it described your predecessor, the founding member of the council. It described what he saw and what he chose to believe about what he saw and why." He looked at Phoenix steadily. "He loved Leviathan." "Did you know that?" Phoenix went absolutely still. "Your family's founder loved Leviathan," Naruto said quietly, without cruelty. "He built the entire doctrine around preventing anyone else from having what he couldn't. He dressed it in prophecy and politics and 300 years of institutional weight, but at its root, the Purification Council was built by a man who was heartbroken." He paused. "That's what fear builds, that's what the original text was describing." The silence on the island was complete except for the sea. Phoenix was looking at him with an expression that was the most human thing Naruto had seen from any devil since the messenger had dissolved in his arms. It was the expression of someone whose entire architecture of belief has just been given a load it wasn't designed to carry, and who is in the process of discovering in real time whether the architecture holds. "If you're right," Phoenix said finally, and his voice was different, older somehow or more honest, the voice underneath the authority. "If the history is wrong, then everything I've done in service of it is what someone does when they're working from bad information," Naruto said. "Not evil, wrong." He paused. "You've kept order for 400 years with incomplete data. That's not a condemnation, it's a description." Phoenix looked at him for a long time. The amber eyes were working through something that had nothing to do with strategy. "The cage," he said. "Keep it," Naruto said. "I'm not asking you to dismantle it. I'm asking you to stop pointing it at me. It's not that simple. I know, the council is an institution. Institutions don't change direction because one person asks them to, no matter how compelling the argument." Naruto leaned forward slightly. "So let me suggest something different. Don't change the council's position. Change the information the council is operating from. Let the record be corrected. Let the actual text of the prophecy be published with the original dialect notation. Let Rias Grayfia's research be presented to the full council, not filtered through your committee." He held Phoenix's gaze. "Give people the accurate version of what they're afraid of and let them decide. They may decide the same thing. Some will, he agreed, but not all and not you. Fenix was quiet. The sea moved. The gray sky was unchanging above them. You're asking me to undermine my own institution, Fenix said. I'm asking you to serve it accurately, Naruto said, which is what you've always wanted to do. You've been serving it accurately, you've just been working from corrupted source material. He paused. Your founder was wrong, that's not your fault, but you have the information now. Another long silence. The operatives in the industrial district, Fenix said. They came back with a description I found difficult to accept. What did they say? That you were calm. He said it with a specific weight as though calm were the strangest word in the sentence. That the fourfold signature at rest was not aggressive. Not building toward anything. That it felt like something that had arrived rather than something preparing to deploy. He looked at Naruto with those amber eyes that held 400 years of careful, sustained, well-intentioned fear. I've been studying this possibility for my entire life. I built every model I had around the assumption that unification would be inherently destabilizing. He paused. You're not destabilizing. No, Naruto agreed. Why not? And it was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not adversarial, the question of someone who needs to understand something and has run out of reasons not to ask directly. Naruto thought about his parents and their letter and the dying messenger, and 3 weeks at a school with wards he could feel breathing in Rias in a library with 2 years of preparation, and Akeno's lightning finally free and Grayfia in a garden reclaiming the outline of herself and Kaneko eating cereal at 5 in the morning, and the kitchen full of people who had decided to be what they were without apology. Because I'm not trying to be all 4 of them, he said. I'm just me, they gave me what they had and I'm doing something new with it. That's not instability. That's just how things work when they're alive. Fenix sat with this for a long moment. Then he stood slowly with the deliberateness of someone making a decision they've been approaching from a long way off. I can't withdraw the council's position formally, he said. Not today, the institutional process, I know, but I can ensure that certain information reaches the full membership, and I can, he stopped. I can suspend the operational directives pending review. He met Naruto's eyes. That's the most I can give you today. That's enough, Naruto said. Is it? It's a start, Naruto said. Which is more than there was yesterday. Fenix looked at him for one more long moment. You're nothing like what I expected, he said, and in his voice was something that had no category in their conversation up to that point, something close to wonder, the specific wonder of someone who has spent a very long time being afraid of a thing and has just discovered the thing is a person. I know, Naruto said. I hope that's useful. Fenix left. Naruto sat on the fallen wall for another few minutes, listening to the sea, letting the island's isolation do its clean, impersonal work on the last 2 hours. Then he stood and went home. He arrived back at the school at mid-afternoon and walked through the building to the club room and found all 4 of them there. Rias at her desk, Akeno in her chair, Kaneko on the windowsill, Kiba standing because Kiba frequently stood in the club room as though sitting down during daylight hours would reduce his readiness for something. They all looked at him when he came through the door. Well, Rias said, suspension of operational directives, he said, pending review. He can't formally change the council's position today, but he's going to ensure the corrected history and the original text reach the full membership. Rias absorbed this. That's more than I expected from a first meeting. He's not the enemy, Naruto said, taking his usual chair. He's just been the most committed person in the room to a wrong answer. You changed his mind, Kiba said, not skeptically, with genuine, slightly startled interest. I gave him better information, Naruto said. He changed his own mind. Kaneko from the windowsill, same thing. Close enough, he agreed. Rias was looking at him with the expression he'd learned to recognize as her genuine state, the one that argued with things internally, that processed and turned and came at problems from 3 angles. But there was something else in it today, something that had been building over the last 3 weeks and had apparently reached a volume she'd decided to address. Before this goes further, she said, and her voice was careful in the way of someone who has composed something and is reading it for the first time while they're saying it. I want to say something. He looked at her. Say it. You've been here 3 weeks, she said. You've enrolled in the school, you've navigated the council, you've identified Deodora, you've handled everything that's happened. She paused, and you've done all of it as an ally. Which is what we agreed. She held his gaze. I don't want you to remain only an ally. The room was quiet. Rias, Akeno said from her chair with a tone that was neither surprise nor objection, something closer to support, the tone of someone who knew this was coming and had made their own peace with it. I'm saying it, Rias said to Akeno, then back to Naruto. I've been thinking about what you are, not politically, not genealogically, what you are to me specifically in the 3 weeks I've known you. And the honest answer is that you are the most genuinely present person I have ever met, and that matters to me in a way I'm choosing not to be careful about. Naruto looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. You know, I've known for a while, he said. I was waiting for you to decide whether to say it, Rias blinked. Then, did you just tell me you were waiting for me to catch up to something you already knew? Gently, he said. She stopped. The composure cracked, and underneath it was the laugh she'd been suppressing, brief and genuine and surprised. That's extremely inconvenient. I know, he said and smiled. For what it's worth, I've known since about day 3, it wasn't a hardship. She looked at him with the real face, the one without the architecture of role and expectation built over it, and what was there was simple and clear and very much hers. We have complicated things ahead, she said. We do, Deodora, the council review, whatever comes after that. Yes. And you intend to face all of it as myself, he said. With the people I choose, that's always been the answer. He held her gaze. You knew that about me, you said it on the first night, she had said it. Whatever arrangement we come to should be one you actually choose. She looked at him across the desk with 3 weeks of shared space and work between them and nodded once. A single motion that was not an agreement being made but an agreement being acknowledged, because the actual agreement had been forming incrementally since the moment he'd walked through the wards. He found Akeno on the roof at dusk. She was in her usual spot at the wall's edge, watching the city do the specific thing it did at that hour, the transition between afternoon and evening, the light going gold and then amber and then beginning to let go. He came and stood beside her and she didn't look away from the city. You heard, he said. I was in the room, she said, and she was quiet for a moment. Then, Rias has always known what she wants, she just has a great deal of practice making herself not want it. A pause. She stopped practicing that with you. What about you? He asked. Akeno turned from the city and looked at him in the amber dusk, and whatever the guard usually did, it wasn't doing it now. She looked at him with the full, unmanaged version of herself, the same version she'd shown him with the lightning, the parts that were devil and fallen angel and something specifically hers that wasn't either. And it was the same way he felt looking at it as it had been that night in the industrial district, like a window being open. I've been deciding, she said, whether what I feel is something I should act on or something I should be careful about. What did you decide? That being careful is something I've done my entire life, she said, and that it hasn't made me safer. It's made me smaller, she held his gaze. I don't want to be smaller. Then don't be, he said. She stepped slightly closer, not dramatically, not with performance, just the natural closing of a distance that had been the wrong size. This is complicated, she said. You understand that. I understand that several things can be true at the same time, he said. I'm capable of that. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then the half-smile arrived, the real version, not the art piece, the one that was small and genuine and considerably more interesting than the composed one. You're impossible, she said. You said I was inconvenient. Both, she said, simultaneously. He went down from the roof and found Rossweisse in the corridor outside the club room. This required some context. Rossweisse had arrived at the school 9 days ago, a transfer from the Norse division of the Valhalla system, referred by someone in the Asgardian hierarchy to Rias' household as a potential addition to the peerage. She was a Valkyrie, or had been recently separated from formal Valhalla service for reasons she described as administrative incompatibility, which was the diplomatic version of I disagreed with my superior on a matter of protocol, and the superior lost and I was reassigned for winning, which was, Naruto thought, the most Rossweisse way to end up somewhere. She was standing in the corridor with a clipboard, an actual clipboard, physical, with paper on it, and a pen, and she was making a list of something. He had observed in 9 days that Rossweisse made lists the way some people breathe, automatically and continuously, as a function of existing. It was not a nervous habit, it was a structural one. The lists were very good. He had borrowed one once to understand the ward maintenance schedule she'd independently developed for the building, and it had been the most precisely organized document he'd encountered in his life. She looked up when he appeared. She had silver-gray hair and eyes the color of deep water in low light, and a face that worked very hard to present as professionally neutral, and succeeded approximately 60% of the time, the other 40% being occupied by an expressiveness she hadn't entirely learned to suppress, which was Naruto's favorite 40%. How was the meeting? She said. Good, he said. Productive. She made a note on the clipboard. He watched her make the note and something about the completeness of the gesture, the way she wrote productive meeting, favorable outcome in her careful handwriting, and ticked a box that he was fairly sure hadn't existed on the list until she created it now, made him smile. You made a box to tick, he said. She looked at the clipboard. The list needed updating. You made a box specifically so you could tick it. That's what boxes are for, she said, with the dignity of someone defending a position that is simultaneously indefensible and entirely correct. He leaned against the opposite wall. How's the ward maintenance schedule going? The secondary east wing layer needs reanchoring by Thursday, she said. The northeast corner has drift. She paused. I left a note about it on the club room desk. I saw the note. I also saw the note about the note, clarifying which desk. She looked briefly, involuntarily, like she was going to defend the second note and then decided not to, which was its own kind of progress. I like things to be clear, she said. I know. Is that, she stopped. Is that a criticism? No, he said. I like that about you. She looked at him with the 30% expression, the one that was unguarded enough to show that she'd heard something she hadn't expected and was processing it with more care than the situation technically required. You like that I make redundant notes about notes. I like that you care about things being right, he said. Specifically and correctly right, not approximately right. I like that you know the difference and that the difference matters to you. He paused. That's not a small thing. She was quiet. Her pen was still held over the clipboard but was not writing. He'd noticed this about her in 9 days, that she received appreciation with the same systematic discomfort that Grayfia did in a different register. Grayfia's discomfort with compliments was the discomfort of someone who had been defined by function for so long that personal recognition felt category inaccurate. Rossweisse's was different. It was the discomfort of someone who had been told, often and in various ways, that the things she cared about were excessive. Too precise, too organized, too much. She had internalized this into a story about herself that framed her strengths as apologies. You're good at this, he said. At what? At all of it, he said. The wards, the lists, the thinking through problems until they're solved. You're good at it and it matters, and you should stop waiting for someone to tell you it's acceptable. The clipboard lowered slightly. I'm not, she started. You tick boxes, he said gently, for things that have already happened because you need the visual confirmation that it was real and that it counted. He held her gaze. It counted, Rossweisse, all of it. She looked at him for a moment with an expression that had the full 40% of the unguarded version, and underneath it something that was not about ward schedules or list management at all, something personal and slightly raw, the expression of someone whose story about themselves has just been challenged by someone who bothered to read the whole story rather than the summary. You've been here 3 weeks, she said. I know, you've been paying attention, she said, as though this were unexpected. You're worth paying attention to, he said. That's not complicated. She looked at him. She looked at her clipboard. She made a small, unscheduled tick on something near the bottom of the page. He couldn't see what, and then looked back up at him with an expression that was somewhere between flustered and determined, the specific combination of someone who has decided to be brave about something small. Northeast corner needs reanchoring Thursday, she said. I could use help. I'll be there, he said. She nodded, precise and satisfied, and wrote something else on the clipboard. The meeting of Deodora Staroth happened not by ambush, not by confrontation arranged at neutral ground, but in the school corridor on a Wednesday morning when Deodora arrived under the guise of an inter-school liaison visit, which was the kind of cover that assumed the target didn't know, which was a miscalculation. Naruto was at his locker when Deodora came through the school's main entrance, and he felt the signature immediately, not powerful, not threatening, but carefully constructed to appear lower than it was, the energy of someone who had spent years performing innocuousness. Deodora was well-dressed, handsome in the particular way of people who have curated their appearance into a social tool, and he moved through the school's entrance hall with the ease of someone who expected every space to accommodate him. He stopped when he saw Naruto. Something happened in his face, not fear, recalculation, the rapid reassessment of someone whose plan has encountered an unexpected variable. Naruto closed his locker and looked at him. Deodora Staroth, he said pleasantly. Uzumaki. Deodora recovered smoothly. He was genuinely good at recovery, Naruto noted, which was consistent with being a long-term intelligence asset for anyone. I heard you'd enrolled. I thought I'd... Stop, Naruto said, not loudly. Simply, the word as a concrete instruction delivered without aggression and completely without negotiation. Deodora stopped. I know about the correspondence with Phoenix, Naruto said. I know about the ward information. I know about the operational calendar. He held Deodora's gaze evenly. I know it all. Deodora's composure was excellent. The recalculation happened so fast it was almost invisible. That's a significant accusation. It's not an accusation, Naruto said. It's information. I'm not interested in punishing you for it. I'm interested in it stopping. Deodora looked at him. really looked past the social performance, past the recovery mechanism at the person actually standing in front of him. He was intelligent enough to recognize what he was seeing. Someone who was not performing the conversation, who was not angling for leverage, who meant exactly what they said. "If you're not interested in punishment," Deodora said slowly, "then what do you want?" "For you to stop feeding information to people who want to end me," Naruto said. "That's it. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm not asking for information in return. I'm not building leverage for later. I'm asking you to stop doing the thing that is actively harmful for your own reasons because you've decided it's not worth continuing." He paused. "Phoenix's operational directives have been suspended. His position is in review. The pipeline you've been maintaining has no current destination." Deodora was quiet. "You're not evil," Naruto said. "You're someone who made a calculation and the calculation has been rendered obsolete. Now you have to decide who you are when the calculation isn't available as a reason." Deodora looked at him for a long, complicated moment, the genuine face briefly visible beneath the constructed one, uncertain, working through something he'd probably not been asked to work through before. "You're very strange," Deodora said finally. "I've heard that," Naruto said. "I'll consider what you've said. That's all I'm asking." Deodora left, not with his plan intact, without a plan, which was a different thing and considerably more interesting. The letter from Surzech arrived that evening. Not the flat disk this time, a full formal letter sealed with the Lucifer household mark, delivered through official channels to the Q school address. Rias opened it at the clubroom desk with everyone present, which had become the default for anything that arrived with official weight. She read it once, her expression shifted through several states. She set it down. "Surzech is convening a special session of the Satan's Council," she said. "He's presenting the original text of the prophecy with full dialect notation. He's citing Grayfia's assessment report as the basis for review." She paused. "He's also formally acknowledging the existence of Naruto Uzumaki as a recognized heir of the original 4 Satan bloodlines." She looked at Naruto. "Officially, in the record." The room was quiet for a moment. "He's making you real," Akeno said, not the half-smile, something more direct. "On the record." "He's been wanting to do it for a long time," Rias said. "He was waiting for the conditions to be right." She looked at Naruto steadily. "After Grayfia's report and the suspension of council directives, the conditions are right." Naruto looked at the letter on the desk. His name in the formal record of the Devil World, an heir officially recognized. He thought about 17 years of a wrong-sized life in a wrong-sized town, carrying something unfolding inside him and having no name for it. He thought about the warm envelope and the messenger and the street outside his ruined apartment, sitting on cracked asphalt with October air and the shape of a new world beginning to assemble itself. "There's a second part," Rias said. "The session will address the question of the 4 Satan thrones, specifically whether a unified bloodline heir constitutes a claim on any or all of them." She paused. "Some factions will argue you have a claim to all 4, and others will argue I'm a threat," Naruto said. "Yes. What does Surzech think?" Rias smiled, the genuine version. "He says, and I'm quoting, 'Let him decide for himself. That's always been the point.'" Naruto held this for a moment. All 4 thrones, the political machinery of the Devil World suddenly presenting him with the option it had spent 300 years trying to prevent. "What do you want?" Rias asked. The same question she'd asked on the first night. He looked at the 4 people in the room, Rias at her desk, Akeno in her chair, Kaneko on the windowsill, Kiba standing. Rossweisse was downstairs working on the ward schedule, which she would update and annotate and leave on the desk with a note clarifying which desk, and he would read it tomorrow morning over coffee. He thought about Grayfia in a garden, reclaiming her outline. He thought about his father, who had stopped negotiations to ask after someone's health and meant it. About his mother, who had moved faster than opposition could form and dealt with it when it caught up. About the 4 of them in a room that no longer existed, choosing something that cost them everything and naming the result after something that couldn't be stopped. "I don't want any of the thrones," he said. Rias looked at him. "Not because I'm afraid of them," he said. "Not because I don't have the claim, because taking a throne means becoming a political function, and a political function is exactly what the last 300 years were designed to make me, either a weapon or a seat of power, and I'm neither." He held her gaze. "What I am is a person who is specifically himself. That's harder to categorize and considerably more useful. The session will let it expect," he said. "I'll attend, I'll speak." I'll demonstrate exactly what I am, which is what Phoenix's operative described in the industrial district, something that has arrived, not something preparing to deploy. He paused. And then I'll come back here. Here, Rias said, to the school. To the school, he confirmed, to Kuo, to the people here and the work here and the thing we're building that doesn't have a name yet. He looked at her. Unless you want to give it a name. She looked at him for a long moment, the genuine face completely present. Not yet, she said. Let it grow first. Good answer, he said. Akeno made a sound from her chair that might have been approval. Kaneko, from the windowsill, sensible. Kiba looked at Naruto with the expression of someone who had been skeptical and had revised that position over time and was now somewhere past revision into something that looked like uncomplicated respect. I'll note for the record, Kiba said, that you are the strangest thing to come through those wards. I was trying to be at least a little considerate, Naruto said. The 4 broken desks suggest otherwise. 3 of those weren't, he stopped. The 3rd one was also mine, actually. That's fair. Rias laughed, the real version, full and unguarded, and it was the best sound the club room had produced in the 3 weeks he'd been there. He went to the roof alone that night, stood at the wall where Akeno stood, looking out at the city, fully his city now, fully where he was supposed to be, in the way that things that have always been the wrong size eventually find something that fits. The November air was clean and cold, and the city's lights mapped out below him in the particular way of something that has no idea it's beautiful. He thought about the session ahead, and Phoenix's ongoing review, and Deodora's recalculation, and Grayfia who would return, because she would some things you could feel the shape of before they arrived. He thought about Rossweisse and her clipboard and the boxes she ticked for things that needed to count. He thought about all of it, the whole structure of what had assembled itself in 3 weeks around a 17-year-old in an orange jacket who had walked through wards without being invited and sat down in a chair and refused to be a category. The power inside him moved at its steady, natural frequency, all 4 components unified, breathing together, doing the thing it did when it was simply itself rather than something prepared or deployed. The warmth of it, the deep settled weight, the feeling of something that had spent 17 years folded finally open and at rest. Do not be afraid of what you are. Be afraid of nothing. He pressed his thumb against the envelope in his jacket pocket, still there, always there. The warmth of it changed from the urgency of the first night into something more familiar, something that had done its job and remained because it meant something beyond function. Below, in the building's warded heart, he felt the signatures of the people who had become, in 3 weeks, the specific shape of where he belonged, each one distinct, each one present, the ward-woven harmonics of the building giving each signature its own texture. Rias like copper and firelight, Akeno like lightning before it strikes the charge in the air, Kaneko like stone, solid and precise, Kiba like still water, deep and clear, Rossweisse like a well-kept record, ordered and thorough. And somewhere in the wider city, moving through official channels at the speed of political machinery, the first honest account of his existence making its way into the record, not what someone feared he was, not what someone hoped he'd be, but what he actually was. Which was this, a person standing on a rooftop in a city that finally fit, with the whole complicated future arranged in front of him like a problem he was genuinely interested in solving. He stood in the cold November air until his fingers went numb. Then he went inside. The east-facing window of the second-floor guest room, his room, which had become his room through the quiet accumulation of occupancy, waited with the particular patience of things that have been there long enough to be trusted. Morning light would come through it at 5:15, which he knew because he'd been awake for it every day of 3 weeks, and he would sit in it with coffee and the low city noise and the faint harmonic of the wards doing their overnight maintenance. And Rossweisse would have left a note somewhere about the northeast corner, and Kaneko would already be in the kitchen, and the day would arrive like days arrived when you were in the right place, without announcement, without ceremony, one thing after another. The simple and extraordinary accumulation of being exactly where you were supposed to be. He lay down in the dark. He was not afraid. He had never been afraid. He was very precisely exactly what his parents had made him to be, the thing that kept going, whatever the conditions, whatever the size of the thing in front of him, whatever the history of the room he'd walked into, and the number of people who had decided in advance that he was a problem. He was Naruto Uzumaki, heir of all 4 Satans, broken 4 desks, walked through every ward, refused every throne. He was, specifically and completely himself. That was enough. That had always been enough. The east window waited for the morning, and the morning came.